You didn't have to worry about undertakers. You didn't have to worry about embalming. You didn't have to worry about even putting your beloveds up on pyres for birds to pick them to death or for, to burn them, because the body would hit that natural point if the bardo was set in place. There was a particular way the consciousness could get out and separate itself from the body template, and then the body template would simply do this thing inside of the prana seed, and it would build up frequency and start radiating itself until it vaporized itself. They wonder why there's not a lot of bodies left from a lot of the Krystic races that were on this planet. They're not going to find them in holes. They're not going to find them mummified. In fact, most of the only people that ever did that with themselves were people who had interest in preserving the DNA for other purposes that usually weren't Krystic. Right? Burying was never a Krystic practice. Mummification was never a Krystic practice. We've been tricked into thinking these things were all right. Why? Because every time you lay a body in the ground, there's a chance of DNA seed being left that can be used and harvested by somebody who might have interest in playing games with the human gene code. So we've been tricked in a lot of ways to at least cremation here, because we can't spontaneously make ourselves vaporize once we pull ourselves out of body, at least not yet. At least in cremation, it allows the DNA template to clear and to transmute and go back into space dust, where it leaves a bit of ash behind. So at least at that point, you've taken all of you with you wherever the next level is that you went to. So there is an advantage to cremation over any of the other things that if a body is going to die, what to do with it. It's all personal. We don't judge anybody on what they choose to do with that. If you're of particular religions that have an issue with that, it's up to you to decide which you feel right with. Nobody judges you. The beloveds don't judge you, that kind of thing. It was just to let you know. But anyway, back to this. I get on these little tangents, right? We are not planning, by the way, to have to bardo, but there will be a point where we get bardo training, all right? Because some people will be able to make it out, actually physically, and be able to be spanners that can walk through the gates, walk through the middle aurora zones and up to Eartha. There are others who will be able to be sliders and be able to slide into that middle zone of the aurora fields biologically. And then there are some people who aren't going to be able to, because of whatever is in the gene code, or because of the time frame left. You might have the gene code, but it didn't start activating till too late, that by the time you need to do this in order to not be here anymore, that your body wouldn't get there in time. So there is going to be bardo training also. And there's going to be a lot of people on the planet that are going to bardo over the next, say, between now and 2047. There's going to be all sorts of strange things that happen because the changes in the sun. There's going to be, viruses and bacteria that weren't awake for many, many eons are going to start coming back to life. Some people, they won't bother. Other people will not have immunity to them. There are going to be people having more issues with radiation from the sun. People running Krys frequency will progressively build more immunity to that, where the sun will actually be something that will charge your cells and assist you. But there will be others who progressively find their body being irradiated by it and developing cancers from it. So it's going to be very strange on this planet as these things progress. They're already there. You can already see evidence of some of this, but it's going to get bigger. They have said that we are entering the period that biblically was known as the plagues. Now, I don't know how bad they are going to be, when they are going to be. I do know that the first modulated gamma burst from the sun, which might turn out as just like, as far as what science can see, would be a strange flux of some sort in the solar flaring cycle. Remember, we are putting a buffer, the beloveds are putting a buffer around this so we don't get irradiated, where all of us have too much radiation to deal with. But the first pulse comes through somewhere in the spring of 2008. And about once a year, there will be a major pulse released and then some other strange stuff. So I don't know what the sun's going to look like, but they're warning us now. Now, for people who are running crystal spiral and people who are running particularly do the techniques that will give you access to the frequencies of the aqualene sun, which have to do with the frequencies of the hosts that are running from this matrix. I wanted to explain to you a little bit about aqualene sun, because that will progressively assist the body to not only have an immunity to some of those things that the solar spectra is going to kick up, but it will actually help you to use some of the solar spectra that's coming in for health, to actually recharge yourselves. So it's a gift. It's going to be, what's happening with the sun is actually going to be a gift for those running Christ, but it's not going to be for those not running Christ. And it's not meant to do that. Now, nobody is doing it to punish them or anything, except a lot of people, if it gets really strange, are probably going to think that God is punishing them or whatever. It's not about that. It's energy consequence to energy action that is taking place. It's not the creator of any sort is judging them as bad. But there are things we can do once we get to the point where we develop an immunity and also an ability to use that energy to assist us. We can help create a field in the planetary shield that will assist other people and animals and plants and things from the direct effects of the solar radiation change. And, it's kind of funny for me to have to speak out about this, because I don't know. I mean, a year from now, I don't know if science is going to see anything. I don't know if it's going to be perceivable. I don't know. I mean, I do know they said within 50 years we'd have one big burst a year. Within 50 years, there'd be nothing but smoke left on the surface of this planet. So we're not going to see that happen because of what the matrix here is doing. Now, what the aqueous matrix are doing, and the first step in doing this is anchoring the Tesa passage from their hubs, which we did early in the 12 Tribes 1 Class 3, which was the March class, the last one. We just did that because, well, we got wind that the Borgia were going to try one more big, great, nasty thing, and that they had to do it then instead of waiting, because we would have waited to do that until Peru, when we go to Peru in May, and then we would have waited to activate it until 2047, when this particular aqualene sun host of Rachalet body was needed, when Eartha starfired to give Earth something to hold it up and keep it in orbit, basically in the solar plane in orbit, when Eartha disappeared into the middle dimensions. So it was intended to come in, but they have had to activate it very much early. Now we've anchored it. The next stage is activating it, the Ansha state Tesa passage, which is part of what we're going to be doing tomorrow evening. So the 12 Tribes 1 Class 3 anchored it, and so it was available for everyone. And this group, for those who'd like to participate, will be given the activations to literally activate its frequencies, which means it'll open the passage where it's passable, which means there'll be some interesting ability to not just go to Adashi temples in visitations, but particularly for those people who are incarnates, who are Aquarian incarnates, who your home matrix, the first place you came out in individuation, it might not have been over here. It might not have been over here. You might have been in the families of consciousness from the Aquarian matrix. I just call it Aquarian matrix for short. And because many of them came into incarnation from there into here, and from there into here, in order to serve this host. So for some people, the going home to the Aquarian matrix, which you can do through projecting through the Ansha passage, is going to be a real healing as far as the emotional body particularly. Because I know, and I'm one of those, and Az is one too, but he's got a really strong connection with the hot Taurus too, as do I, but not as strong as his with hot Taurus. But there's a thing, when you find a space that you realize you're connecting with something that is home, a home you've forgotten, a name you couldn't even remember. But when you feel it, there's just this melt. A part of you just goes, Mama. And I've had little mamas all the way. Every level of council that we went, from when we were speaking with the Elohai, then going up to the Iani, and then going over to the crossover ones, which are the Adandrea, and then over to the Adonai, and then down to the Hathors, and now over to the Aquari. I've had little bits, but when the Aquarian information started to come through, which was just before FOL 07, I melted. So there will be some people that have that feeling about that word or that name, who feel like they're not just indigos, but they're Aquarian line indigos. And you will be able to use the connection in frequencies that will activate in your Rachalet body to send messages home, and you'll get messages back. All right, it will help you build a secure line. It'll take a bit of time for any of us to get secure lines as far as communication. I always say take it all with a grain of salt. All right, even after you do your journey and you meet who your advisor, reader, and advisor person is going to be, and you meet your bendy trainer, put it all in file 13. Whatever they say, assume that yes, it's probably them. All right, but don't ever think that any of us down here, with all the mess that's in the electromagnetic fields on this planet, are immune to having something try to tap that line between where they're trying to talk to you and where you are. Because something can still ride your line and say, "Oh, hi, I'm your Aquarian advisor. Come and do this. Come and lead 20 people off a cliff." Right? No. All right. This would not be your advisor. It might tell you some glorious things about yourself, and if they're true, great. But if they're not, that wouldn't be the advisor that would tell you something like that. It would be somebody trying to masquerade at them. So even once you start contact, you still have to do it with wisdom, with responsibility, with don't just trust it immediately because it said that. You can let yourself trust a bit. The frequencies we're working with are quite strong, and they will, this is why the access journey is so important, that will get you up there with a group for the first time. All right, so it will at least give you the signature in your own Rashalai body of the direct line, and they will do their best once that line is open to keep it as protected as possible, but you have to use it too. I go every night. I just go, well, you'll see in the meditation, right, where you go up and you glide up the tube. If you use it frequently, it will strengthen the amount of frequencies that are coming through from the ancestation passage, but also from the first thing that was opened, which was called the crystal river. When we do the Rihavea un Cristallo, the crystal river currents, what they are the simple crystal spiral currents from the three akashas, from our akasha, from the still crystic part of the Wisale, and from the aqueous matrix. If you blend the crystal spiral currents of their three matrices together, you have a braided, very strong crystal spiral current. That is the rider wave that the other currents have to come in on. So first we started with that, which was activated during the FOL period, of FOL 07 in January. The next thing that was activated was called the Arc of Aquarii, and I believe we did that during 12 Tribes 1, I think. Yeah. That was from the outer domains, braided into the crystal river spiral, was an outer domain current, and instead of looking like the pale silvery white color of the crystal river, it's actually a pale aqua color. All right, now like aqua greeny color. So that's when we started to look at, if you do your Maharic shield and you realize your Maharic shield came up turquoise. Why? Right? That's when that came online, when the Arc of Aquarii came in from the outer domains. Now there's one more set of frequencies, well, actually two more, being added to that. You not only have the outer domain from the aqueous matrix coming in on the crystal river, you will also have the hub currents from the Anshatesa passage coming in on the crystal current, on the crystal river currents, and the hub currents from the Hathor. Now, the Hathor currents are quite a deep, almost purpley blue. It's kind of like cornflower blue when you see them in frequency and you close your eyes. And these, again, are a greeny tint, like a greeny aqua blue, but a bit deeper than the outer ones. And they have a silver tint and like heliotalics running with them. So now you've got this current coming in that you have the three parts of the braid of the crystal river. You have the outer domain pale aqua currents of the outer domains of the Aquarii, which is the Arc of Aquarii, and then you have the bluey aqua color that will be coming in from the hub, the Anchastasia, and the Hathor hub coming in. Those combined, when you add these two, the hub from here and the hub from here, to the crystal river and the ray of Aquarii, altogether, they're not just called the crystal river, they're called the aqualene transmission. All right. So aqualene transmission refers to that very large, powerful blended ray that is just now being able to be activated because it requires not only anchoring of the Anschastasia passage, but full opening of it. And that is what the grid work is going to be tomorrow. The techniques we participate in tomorrow will be partly about that, and that is what gives us enough frequency to engage first prana exchange since 15,400 BC. So I just wanted you to understand the difference of them. Now, when we get into Rashalai body a little bit, there's going to be a point where we talk about, more of it will be tomorrow, but a little bit today. When we talk about the Rashalai body levels and activating Rashalai body, there's a particular set of frequencies that have to do with the blending of the aqualene transmission. And when you not only run the currents of Rachelet that pertain to just your matrix, those with the query codes, those people who have the aqualine lineage with them, and most of them are the ones that are coming to the workshops at this point because that call is going out, you will be able to activate something. And first it will come from the query-coded ones, but once they do it, because they also have human codes, anybody with angelic human codes will also be able to activate this in their Rachelet bodies hosted through the aqualine indigo shield. All right, and what that is called the aqualene sun. And it's called the aqualene sun because it is the aqualene transmission frequencies coming through and activating the radio body on the trimatrix. It will give some people at some point the ability to, if they once we get done on Earth down here and those kind of things, or we want to go all the way home, it will give you the ability to go all the way home. But it also will give you the protection field needed. It will give you your personal screen, just like the sun is going to get one of these to protect, to transmute the gamma rays that it's going to be releasing from its core. We're not going to be releasing gamma rays from our core because we're not going into Bardo, but it will give us, in our radio bodies and in our Rachelet bodies, it will give us that same transmutation screen. So we'll be able to transmute more of the stuff coming in from the sun that gets through the aqualene sun that's going to be around the sun. And what I brought this for today is we've been using this in all the 12 tribes. They've activated this. They said they can activate glass just like they can activate clear crystal because it has a sand base. So they've been using this. I don't know how good you can see it here. What we're going to do is we're going to pass it around tomorrow so you can look at it for a minute and also just hold it for a second because they're going to activate it to transmit something. I don't know what yet, and people who would like to receive that will be able to hold it for a second and inhale and get whatever it is. But we have been using this. This holds the colors. This was a gift to Azanai from Mac, and she just got nudged to get that for us. And it was before we had any of this information, right? So all of a sudden it's like, that's what that is for, and they've been doing things with it. So it's a coated crystal, even though it's made of quite amazing glass. You'd be able to see it closer when we pass it around, either tonight or tomorrow. And it's not passed around like stare at it for half an hour because we'll be here for a year, right? But it gives you the idea of something that activates in the body that is called the aqualene fire water flame. And that is what will allow for the Rachelet body to activate as aqualene sun, where you can actually control the activation of it. Oh, you're going to do that, aren't you? There was something that they gave in 12 Tribes 3 class, I believe, and it was during Journey 2, and I know we're not doing Journey 2 in this workshop. We're supposed to do, just the access key journey to get you up to Adashi. But there was a little thing that had to do with Journey 2 when you went to the second floor of Adashi, that they gave us crystals in our palms, and they said, once you were up there, like in the journey, and once you had them, all you had to do was just squeeze or stimulate the hand. It was always the right hand. They gave them to us in the right hand, and you could just rub the chakra in the center of the right hand a little bit, and it would activate the fire water flame inside, which would activate the aqualene sun field around the outside. And I'm glad that I knew they didn't want to do Journey 2 here. There's not enough time to do both of the full journeys because there's something else that this group needs to do that will be just as fun, I'm sure. But they're going to ensure that you do get your crystals, so you'll still have that palm activation. And if you were ever kidnapped and your hands were tied behind your back and you really needed protection, just send a ray of energy from your brain down to your palm, and it will do the same, but it's actually a little bit stronger until it builds up in the body, like, where your body gets used to doing it, if you do the palm rub. So I guess we're going to get that tomorrow, too, and it's going to have to do with passing that around, where they're going to load it somehow, and anybody that wants to get those codes will be able to get them in the palm. And they just sit there in your chakra, in the palm chakra seed seal. And I see them, and sometimes you'll find this amazing, aqua blue crystals, little tiny micro crystals coming out and stuff. Like if you're doing healing, all of a sudden it'll kick on all on its own. It's like it knows what to do, where you don't have to think about, do I use aqualene sun here or whatever. And it is the strongest protection field and transmutation field that can come, and it is a aqualene transmission, which is all those blended rays on the Crystal River currents. So it's an upgrade of the Crystal River currents, basically. So I just wanted you to understand all those parts, where everybody was, what currents are coming from, and when we use certain terms like Crystal River, which means one thing, which are the three Akasha currents blended together, when we use arc of Aquarii, which was the outer domains current that came in the Crystal River, and then we have the aqualene transmission, which is that plus the hubs from the Absentia and the Hathor hubs blended together. So you basically get a really beautiful, still looking mostly sparkly white heliotallic with pale aqua green colors like are in there, and also this deeper kind of more blue aqua that comes through, and that's the one with the Hathors on it. So that is the frequencies. These are the frequencies we are working with at this point. They're huge, and I'm very grateful that the Aquarii are here. They rescued us. Because honestly, the Indigo Shield wasn't doing too good as far as we did our best. And once they combined the Beast Metatronic technologies with the Threshold Timer Borgia technologies, we were about done for at that point, right? And the Borgia were quite confident that we would be. But what they weren't anticipating was there'd be enough of us standing to be able to... They knew the Aquarii matrix had, the aqueous matrix, had this plan. But they didn't think there'd be enough standing on Earth to be able to anchor it on Earth. And we have. They might have got the sun, Sol, but we've got Earth so far, right? And the idea is to hold that host here so they can host through... We're hosting Earth, basically. The Indigo Shield is hosting Earth. And the Eartha... Aquafarion, and then their Bendy Aurora races, which are descendant of the aqueous races, are hosting us, and then the aqueous matrix is hosting them. So this is a big three-way host, basically. Somewhere in there, the Weasolas are getting hosted too, whatever parts of their matrix aren't falling. They're also being put under aqualene sun protection, whatever parts. They haven't told me much about them. We have to get ourselves straight over in our matrix first before we worry too much about him. But we won't be doing Weasadrak black hole fall or Borgia black hole fall. This planet won't be, and this Vecca won't be, because we've got Earth and Eartha, we've got Sirius B, and we've got Andromeda to be able to activate aqualene sun. And that gives a protection field that will at least hold harness on the other parts of this falling Vecca. So some of them will fall sovereign, and others will not fall. Yeah, the parts that are Christic won't fall at all. But meanwhile, we got a big evac wave coming, and it's all pointing downward toward Earth. Right? Earth is the one place that fully anchors in 3D the Antenstatia passage, and it will hold this after Starfire 2047, 2051. After that point, there will be one passage left out, and it will spiral up from Earth and Eartha. Well, Eartha will be visiting home at that point. Spiral up from Earth in its aqualene sun, up into Sirius B through its core, but not fully on its surface, because it only has partial gyrodome activation, because everybody pretty much evac'd from there. And with Andromeda, it will go up into the nurseries, which are basically in the Andromeda galaxy outside of the system. So we're the one planet left in this particular Eka-Veka system that's in this galaxy that is going to be able to hold this passage open. And the passage anchors in through Shala 13, which is the core 13 gate. You have core 13, 14, and 15 gates, 13 being the strong one, the strongest one, and that one is what we're sitting on under the Phoenix area. So, and that plugs into Shalon 7 and those kind of things. So we'll talk about those later. But this actually, at least you'll have a better idea of the words we're talking about, what transmissions are what aqualene suns are, and at least that will give you a visual of the colors that are involved. And there's a flame that once we go through the activations you've already started them with the activations you did earlier with us, it begins the process of activating that in the area of the seed atom, which is also the area of the prana seed. So that is the beginning of the aqualene sun activation. Next one, please. Now I believe we go into Rasha bodies yet. This is only 2 seconds on this one. This is to remind you of where creation started was with the first Partakai. All right, I'm not going through the whole starborn cycle here. I just wanted to remind you that it exists, okay? Because to understand Rashala, it helps to understand where it came from, where the Rashala bodies came from. All right, so we start with the first Partakai, the second Partakai, formed the triad. From the triad, it went through all these things, and it birthed the Taran light seed. All right, next one, please. This is just to show you. These were in Tenerife. We introduced these in Tenerife workshops, so if anybody wants to know, not going there. We didn't even get that one done. There was another whole page of those little interactions between sparks. But by the end of that what was one partikai and then another partikai, the first two partikai, one moving through each other, forming the triad, by the end of them sparking, like this, sparking together, phase sparking, right? Partikai sparks. It formed that, which is called the Taran living light seed. And the only reason we're going back to Taran right now is because there's something very important about understanding the structure of the Rasha bodies. It has to do with not only understanding, all right, you have the Taran, you have the three outer sparks, and then you have what's called the partiki. These are partikai sparks. This is a partiki spark, right? P-A-R-T-I-K-E, right, which is a different spelling than partiki. That's later. But the partiki is the first photogenerator cell. That photogenerator cell has a particular structure in the center of the Taran, and that structure becomes extremely important as we go up out of the starborn cycle and into the krystar cycle. So I wanted to remind you that we started with partikai 1. We got to formation of the Taran and its core photogenerator cell. And next we'll go and see the structure of the photogenerator cell, I think. We'll have to show how it pulses, right? This is all Tenerife stuff, I believe. So that is the Taran when it's in its expansion or relaxed phase. When it squeezes together into a contraction like this, it makes sparks. So it generates sparks. And those sparks are a quantum of energy. So it is able to, this is the process whereby the Taran begins to generate spark pulse currents that allow for quantum building, which allow for the expansion of light body structure from the single little Taran unit, light seed, all the way out through to what becomes eventually the Yukatharista body. But before that, it becomes the Rasha bodies that we're going to be activating. So this is just to remind you of the Taran and when it squeezes tight and pulses, right? And when it squeezes, it makes sparks. And when it releases again, it lets the sparks go. And when it does that 12 times, it begins making what are called harmonic keys. This is where we got into the harmonic key cycles. All right? They're important, too, when we see the structure of the Rasha bodies. Okay? Next one, please. This is to remind you, stuff from Tenerife again, back at the Taran, in its expanded phase. See these little layers here? This is where we learned about the gelesic layers within the Taran. And they each have a different type of, we call them ether gels, basically, but they're different types of gelatinous radiation structures that are inside of the Taran. And it's the process of the partikai units phasing through the partiki of the Taran that create the sparks that allow for quantum generation. And these structures, again, will become important when we see the structure of the partiki templates and the partiki bodies. All right, because right now we're looking at it as a very tiny thing inside of a very tiny thing that is the first light seed, the Taran. Later, these will become much bigger structures. Now, we have 8 inner layers, and then 9 inner layers, and then 10 through 15 of the outer layers. I'm not going to go into the names of these. All this stuff of the ovum of living light and all that, that's all covered, I believe, in Tenerife, and probably somewhere after that. I think we covered it too. So this is just to remind you of these structures, where these structures first appeared in creation. This is in the first creation process. Next one, please. If we look at that without all the Taran around it, you're looking just at the gelesic layers now that are inside the partiki. Okay? We have one at the center, and they all have different names. Okay? We have the 1 through 9 are considered the inner layers, and then 10 through 15, which aren't even shown over here, 13, 14, and 15 are out here, are the outer layers. You have 1 is called the Nada, 2 is called the Adama, 3 is called the Jaffa, 4 is called the Tao, T-A-O, 5 is called the Ida, 6 is called the Jada, 7 is called the Ta, 8 is called the Ma, 9 is called the Ka, with K-A, 10 is called the Ra, 11 is called the Ra, Sha, 12 is called the La. Then we come out to 13, 14, and 15. We have the Ka, K-H-A, the Tha, T-H-A, and the Ra, R-A. And there would be the 15 layers inside of a partiki, all right? Now, inside the partiki unit, after, I believe, this point, it starts to extend out into the Taran itself, where you have the inner layers inside and then extends outward. These are, when we're talking about it in relation to the Taran. Oh, by the way, too, I wanted to point out down here, in this particular one, is showing the Kathara grids and actually how these are placed. These aren't randomly drawn circles. These hold a mathematical proportion of these particular spheres. They're not just flat things. These are spheres of energy, and the proportions to each other are built completely on the a spinning, expanding Kathara grid template. So you have the smallest one at this axis, and then the next one this way. So, we've explained these before. This is how the crystal spiral itself forms. So they're very precise to the mathematics of the Kathara grid and its spiraling, where it would go from, I think this is the, let's see, the first axis is in here, so small you can't see it. So it would go 0 point, and then 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4. It gives you axes. 0, 1, 2, 3. This is not the right diagram to show this. 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, 6, 7. It gives you basically, and then back to 0 again, it gives you 8 axes of spin. All right, and these literally create the proportions. If you draw a circle around each one of those Kathara grids, it gives you the, from the top to the bottom of it, it gives you the proportion of the corresponding Jaleesic layer in the Partiki. And the same thing applies when we get up into the Partiki bodies that are large versions of this. And that's why we're showing you this, to remind you where these came from and what they do, because the Partiki bodies are much, much larger, and they do a similar thing. Not exactly the same, but similar. What the Partiki... Partiki, yes, E on the end. Partiki body, no, I'm saying that wrong. Hold on. I get tongue-tied on these. Partiki, that's what I'm trying to say. Yes, the Partiki at the center of the Taran, which is the small one, this is the key generating factory. Let's see the next one, please. I'm not going to go through these heavily. We've been through these in Tenerife. Remember, all of these were large diagrams with lots of words on them that explained what harmonic keys are. What, like the keys of Inoka and E with Ka, right? Right. Which means life force in a very simple way. All right. This just showed you how the keys, how the Taran, with its Partiki in the center, does its pulsing, and every pulse releases a burst of sparks. And after 12 sparks, you get a set of, I believe, 144 sparks. The sparks, this one drives me nuts because I have it in a zigzag as far as to fit them all on. So that was the second one that makes sparks. Then number 3 is over here. Number 3, the sparks form harmonic keys. For it, the keys go through something called key resolution, where they distribute their quantum. And here is where you go. The harmonic keys themselves, you had an overtone key and a bass tone key. The bass tone key is made of units that are made of ERA substance, EIRA, and the overtone keys, before they go through resolution, are made of Manet. All right, so they're Manet keys. Now that's a positive charge, where the ERA has a negative charge. When we get over to here, there's something called key resolution that occurs, where here is where we end up with prana being formed, where there's a redistribution of quantum between, I'm not going to go through what that is right now, it's on, I believe, the Tenerife tapes, I think, but redistribution of the quantum between the two keys, the bass tone and the overtone, where the larger overtone key, that is the mana key, breaks down and it gives to the bass tone key, it gives a quantum equal to that of the bass tone. Now, the bass tones are a base 11 2/3 negative charge, and the mana, or Manet key, would be a 33 1/3 positive charge quantum base. It loses 11 2/3 positive quantum and gives it to the bass tone, and that leaves 21 2/3 positive quantum as what's called the kasha key. And down here, you have an 11 2/3 negative ERA key, which is a bass tone key, and a new thing called, which eventually becomes the elan. It's called the jala key. It becomes the elan, which is a carrier of the joules, which have to do with the units of heat and work that science talks about here. All right. So this is where joules are formed, and this is the beginning process of where these little tiny structures inside the Taran begin the process of the formation of the things that come before matter that lead up to the formation of matter. So we end up with a kasha key and what's called a crystal key that has the the base tone key of 11 2/3 negative era, and the overtone, what's called the overtone equilibrium key, because it's equal to the base tone, which is 11 2/3 positive, and it was part of the mana, but that becomes prana. So that's where prana forms, by splitting of the mana into mana and prana. All right? So we have prana, era, and mana at this point, where mana is 21 2/3 positive base. So this is where, when we use the words mana, prana, and era, what we're talking about. And this is where prana starts. Prana starts with the first cycle of the keys that started out as mana, and mana broke down into two parts, not equal parts, but one has 21 2/3 base positive charge, and that's the mana, and the remainder of that, which is called the overtone equilibrium, is the prana, or the prana key, which is, actually prana key is something that's half of that. Now, prana, and the prana is 11 2/3 positive frequency that used to be mana, but when it's separated out and put in with the base tone, it becomes prana. So prana becomes key to what's called a backflow return. There's something called a prana exchange that we're going to talk about more tomorrow after we understand structure here. We'll understand where the prana seed comes into being and why it is important and what it has to do with core gates and what it has to do with bardo or not. So this is where prana starts. So we have prana, mana, and era. These are the key cycles of the Taran. And through these key cycles, quantum is built. It is built and stored in the form of harmonic keys, which are like little Jaleasic balls of radiation with various different charge and quantum holding. And the keys go under resolution, and that's where prana gets formed. And then the keys collect together and form what are called tachyons, and then tachyons form together, and they go through what is called a flash point. And this is where they go through the first creation point, because remember, all of this came out of the first particle, the first point. And from that, on that same point, is where you had the Taran form with its particle in the center. So everything is centered on that first creation point, where the first particle was given from source. And it is back through that first creation point that once the quantum is built up through key generation, through spark generation that become keys, and we get into like what becomes keylons and fire letters and all that stuff as part of that, but we don't have to deal with that right now. That's in the Tenerife workshop, and I think maybe Denver, because we talked about this more when we talked about sacred sex, because it has to do with that too. But that center point is the first point where the first particle was created, and that's the center point that the whole light body structure actually evolves on and from. And that's the flash point. When you get a certain quantum built, where the keys go under resolution, they store for a bit, they build up more through the continued sparking or pulsing of the Taran. They build up into tachyons, and tachyons unite and form a field, and when they reach a certain vibrational level, they spark open the center point, and the first creation point inside of the particle, and then the whole thing goes back in. All of the quantum of the particle goes back in. I believe the Taran goes back in, and it replicates because it creates the first backflow to source. Source created the first gift, the first outflow of the first two particle, and they created the Taran from their interactions together. And then through the generation of the Taran with the particle in the center, and it had to do with the sparks. This creates the first full backflow to source, and it creates a replica, a times 2 replica of the quantum that was sent back in. And this is how the birthing cycle starts, as far as clusters of light cells that become what we call the starborn cycle that lead up to later the creation of the partiki body that is the Rashala, or the Rasha bodies. So I wanted to show you this, to remind you of this, how keys are formed sparks form by the pulsing of the Taran through the Jaleasic layers in the particle center, and they are the process by which quantum is built up, where it is a self-generating quantum. Just by pulsing and these things rubbing together, they are creating sparks that have qualities of what has been rubbed together, and they create their own quantum, and that quantum is given back as a gift to source, and then source doubles it and sends it back again. All right? So to understand that basic process of backflow to source, and then you get what's called backflow return from source. So as long as that creation point is open, you have backflow and backflow return. You have an open circulation, the breathing rhythm of source. Backflow, you have contraction of the light bodies. Outflow, you have expansion of them. And it's the natural waves of ascension and return home. Because what you actually have is what do they call it? It's not descension. It's like disbursement. Disbursement wave, where you go into manifestation, into the different domains of the light body, into individuation of consciousness. And then the ascension cycles that come back this way, and are the back flow, return flow, back into source. The outgoing cycles are called the Akashi cycles, the expansion cycles. And then there's a certain point of full expansion of quantum where there is a turnaround that occurs. And then there are the Adashi cycles that come back. So when we talk about the Adashi temples that we've mentioned, we are talking about the particular structures on Eartha, and there are those in other places that have to do with the Rashalay body structure, that activates the Rashalay body in a way that it sets in motion those ascension currents, or those backflow return, or backflow currents back to source. All right? It's a process that we'll see at the end of Rashalay body structure, where you'll see why I keep saying Rasha bodies and not just Rashalay anymore, because there are several stages of them. But we'll see something called the krystar circulation. You have first creation, and then you have eternal creation. And it is because of the process involved with the krystar that it is eternal creation, where the first creation perpetually goes, perpetually, continues to recreate itself through expansion and contraction through the breathing rhythm of source. Next one, please. Let me get through these quick. Onto Rasha. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to go through. Yeah, we don't need to go into quantum. I just said all that really fast. I had put these. There's a couple of these I just put up, the big ones on, that had to do with key resolution, so you'd find out where prana came from, in case you didn't know where prana as an energy came from. Yeah, all of those. These are just the big versions of the ones you saw a summary chart on, where they were all like that. And they were introduced, I believe, in the Tenerife workshop. Yeah, that's where I was sitting there pasting them up at the coffee table. Yeah, right. And I think some more were introduced, I think, in Denver. Which one is that? No, we got through that. All right, yeah, wait. Yeah, I think I need that one. Yes, please. Now, through those key generation cycles, right? Not spending a whole lot of time on this. We're going to be learning a lot more about all of this. But there's a whole bunch of diagrams that there wasn't time to do yet, because what you saw with that summary chart, with all those, whether the 5 diagrams on there, 6 or whatever, takes you up to, we got through key resolution. It jumped over these to get you to the point of tachyon flashpoint, right? These were diagrams that had like several probably pieces to each of them that go in between key resolution, where the prana was formed, where the prana keys were formed, or what are called the elans. Basically, in simple terms, these keys that had been bass tone, overtone, that became bass tone, split overtone, split into overtone equilibrium, or prana key, and overtone differential, the difference between, which is the mana key. From this point here of key resolution. Wait a minute. I just got. Why is talking? I don't know what. Hold on a second. I'm getting line interference. Somebody's talking to me. What are you trying to tell me? Besides, hurry up. I know. All right. Just tell them about that. All right. Okay. All right. During key resolution, it sets the ground for what become alans, kalans, and shalans, or we call them the ask sets. Alans, kalans, and shalans have to do with consolidated or condensed keys that go through several processes that to become alans, kalans, and shalans. But what were the prana keys that were the 11 2/3 positive overtone equilibrium key? They become alans. All right, the prana keys become alans. So the alans are the carriers of the prana. The bass tone keys they become shalans, and they're the bass tones. They are carrier of the era energy, and the kalans are the carriers of the mana, or the overtone differential. And when those keys come together, something interesting happens. When those 3 units, which we'll see where they form later, where they form, when they come together, we go through all these stages of what keys do, and this is like little keys still in the part of key of the taran, right? This is all happening in there. this whole process also happens in the larger body structures of the partiki templates that are large versions of that little tiny center of the Taran. So this is why I started here. So you'd remember what the Taran is, what it does, where its photogenerator cell is, because what the partiki bodies become are like very large photogenerator cells. And they are the photogenerator cells that produce the quantum that allows for the creation of the outer bodies of the Eukaryorista. Right? So anyway, we have the key flash point. That's the tachyon point. Now, this is just one like tachyon cycle. After several tachyon cycles, after you get 3 tachyon cycles, I believe, one tachyon cycle. After 3 harmonic key cycles, you get what's called key ordination, which is a process by which something called mata-ors are formed. And the mata-ors become the carriers of the jala, or the Allah, or the elan. It's not Allah like the Muslim god. It's actually a J, but the J is silent. So that's what's the core of the elans are actually a mata-or with a jala or in it, and it forms an elan, or a jelan, but the J is silent. So elans, kalons, and shalons. We call them the ask crystal sets. There's a process by which, after several numerous key cycles, tachyon cycles, you have key cycles, 12 key cycles form a tachyon cycle at one flash point. At that point, you go from the Taran to the next unit, and this is where we get the star-born cycle, where there are sets of tachyon cycles. 1 tachyon cycle is 12 harmonic key cycles. You have a series of 6 tachyon cycles that form a full star-born cycle. 6 plus one thing that's called the 7th cycle, that is the Rusate cycle, and then the 8th cycle, which is called the flame cycle. These all add up to it, I'll show you in a minute, is creation of the seed atom. All right. Now, later it gets interesting because it doesn't just happen once. It happens for each of the domains. But when we get to a certain point, I think we're going to talk a bit about it tomorrow. After the keys go through all of these things, they hit their flash points. After a whole, this is like one tachyon flash point at the end of one set of 12 harmonic key cycles. After a whole set of 6 flash points, or 6 full tachyon cycles, there are things that take place that are how keys become more objectified and begin to densify into matter. And there's a key point here that is called the manifestation of the keys. After they go through these series of things that we're just getting the information on how that works, the 14th is called key distribution, and this is where they form ASK-O sets, ASK-O sets. The O's have to do with something of alons, kalons, shalons, and something called orons that have to do with the outer field around the partiki, but also the outer field around the partiki templates, as we'll see. And then there's something called fertilization, conception, and birth of the keys. And this is when the shalon has the kalon come down into it and the alon go up into it, and it fertilizes, and it creates a whole set of things that have to do with firing the fire lines. And we're going to learn more about what that has to do with the prana exchange, because it is going to be something we're fully setting in motion, not just because we've set in motion the key generation cycles through the activation we've done before in our Tarans, but what we haven't done yet is activate the partiki body templates that are like huge bodies around us, not just little tiny seeds here. And when you get them both activated, it really expedites the activation of the Rasha bodies. So I just wanted you to see that there's a whole list of things that would have many, many more diagrams with little key things on it, just to explain what happens inside of the partiki. But inside of the partiki of the Taran, that is a good example of what happens in the larger partiki body template. All right, next one, please. That, again, is just to show you how I said the proportions of the circles or the spheres were created by the particular alignment of these little catharogrids. And those catharogrids, each one of them would have the proportions to itself, as that first one you saw. There's specific proportions to it. And the first one started on that, which is called the 0-point axis. All right. The next one, they told me how to do the proportions this way, because I'm terrible with math, right? They said, draw a little catharogrid on that axis. Okay, got that. And then they said, look at where the 9-point would be on the on the next one up, and we'll let the 9 and the 12 be together. So if you were going to make a bigger one, and that tip point would be the 12 of the one you just did, let that be the 9-point of the next one, and spin it clockwise. I kind of went, huh? And somehow it came out where I got the gist of how to do it, where, again, this is that 12-point would be the 9-point of this one, right? And then there's this one, right? And that 12 point would be the 9 point of this one. So this is how they spiral out, and it creates progressively, and it's different. It's a different proportion than you would have if you just say did one Cathara grid here and then another, drew a line here and put another one inside of it with the tips touching. There are two different types of expansion. One is the spiraling expansion, and there's certain points in the Partiki template that you get a different kind of expansion, where it's like a pop expansion, where this is where you get the shapes of the embedded grids, where on a Cathara grid, where you would have a natural, say, this line would be the Rajna line, right, where you'd have the Rajna there, and you'd have this line would be the Iyumbi line, right? If we've shown another type of embedded Cathara grids, where you have at the Rajna and the Iyumbi points would be the top and bottom points of the next Cathara grid inside, right? So there are two types of expansion that take place in forming of the Partiki body. And the first one is the spiraling. And on the spiraling, it gives you the proportions of each of what become the cell clusters of the star-born body that eventually form the seed atom. All right, next one, please. So those proportions are all built on this. Now, they're not perfect because by the time you photocopy something 3 times, everything changes shape. It's like not quite exactly the same as it was when you started. And I don't do these on the computer. I do them by hand. Eventually we'll have, as we'll do computer stuff with these because he's really good with that. But I go blind when I stare into the computer screen, so I avoid it whenever possible. But this shows you again the layers, the layers of the Partiki. And these are, again, the same diagram will eventually be used to show you the layers of the Partiki template that would be the large one around you. Right? But again, they have the same names, where they have the Nada, the Adama, the Jaffa, the Tao, the Ida, the Jada, etc. But what it's also pointing out is you not only have these gel layers, but in between them, there are crystalline bands that form, crystallizations of the two fields that are bumping together. So, like, say you have one, the Nada gel, and then 2, the Adama gel. When they rub through each other, they create a third substance. All right? That substance, they call them the crystalline bands, or the orbitas of the Partiki, or the Partiki. All right? So there are 15 layers and also 15 bands, the bands that form in between them. The bands simply, they're considered at the 0.5 scale. So if you have 1 here and 2 here, the band between the 1 layer and the 2 layer would be the 1.5 layer. And that would be band 1. All right, so this is how we get the bands. These become important when we're understanding the Rashale bodies, with the bigger ones. So this is where it starts, still in the Partiki. And what these do is you end up, can we pull this up a little bit, honey, please, so I can see these? You end up with, in the Partiki, you end up with these as they call the atom of the inner yolk, the Nada, the Adama, and the Jaffa. There's a barrier, a double barrier that forms between each layer. And there's the 4, 5, and 6, which are the Tau, the Ida, and the Jada. Then another barrier. Then the 7, the 8, and the 9. The Ta, the Ta, the Ma, and the Ka. They have larger names to them, but we always use the short version, which is the Ta, the Ma, and the Ka. And then here you have the Ra, the Sha, and the La, with, again, another barrier between each set of 3. So you end up with, first of all, 5 sets of 3 layers, gel layers, right? And in between those run the bands between them. So you have the Adama Nada, the Jaffa Adama, the Tau Jaffa, and then here you have the Ida Tau, the Jada Ida, the Garden of Eden, Jada Ida, the Ta Jada, the Mata, the Kama. This is where we're doing all that Kama Sutara stuff. Right, the Kama lines, Kama Sutra, right? That's what they were trying to explain in those ancient Sanskrit books. Once upon a time, they had more of the texts. Now they seem to just have got pictures. I wouldn't blame that on the Sanskrit teachings either. I blame that on the new translations. So these bands, these are the names of the bands that go between the Kama, the Raka, right? Up here we've got the Shara, the Lasha, the Kala, or the Kale, light barrier, is here. And then here you have the Thaka and the Ratha. And here, this should be an O, you have the Oriyas. Because out here, when you get past, you got layer 15 Ra, then there is a band that forms, a crystalline band, at 15.5. And out here you have what is called the aurea, dark light vibration field. All right, it's different than the aureas, where you have, like we've, the aurea cum nara and that kind of stuff, where we're dealing with sound tones of a different type that have to do with the outer domains. The aureas are before the arias. They're down in still in the little partiki level, the partiki level, and also the partiki level. So this would be combination of the ra and the aurea, where you get aura, O-R-R-A. The aura line would be here. So that shouldn't be an A there. All right, so this is just showing you that when you see these 15-layer templates, you're talking about the first one, you've got layers, and they're the ones that these would be the layers, gel layers, and then you have the crystalline bands that form in between them from the rubbing together of the gel layers. All right, next one, please. Wait a minute. Do I want to do anything else here? Yeah, they also call these the density commands, where I think I wanted to show you that a little bit better, where each one of these ends up representing an elemental field of consciousness that become the elements, literally the units of consciousness that form, or the radiation templates that form what we call elements on the atomic charts, or the, what do they call that thing? That's the one, periodic table. Yeah. Right. So this is where the elemental fields form, where you have 5 basic elemental fields, and each one of them with 3 layers and 3 bands. Right. So we're not going to talk too much in this workshop about elemental force, because we're doing that in the 12 tribes classes more, where we're doing elemental command stands and those kind of things. But all of that comes from here too, which comes from the 12 Jaleesic layers, 15 Jaleesic layers and 15 crystalline bands. Next one, please. Yes, here we talk about the elemental commands. What's interesting about this is once it goes into partiki replication in the bigger layer, you end up with one layer of those having these actually switch, because I asked them, do we have these wrong? Because what you see here is the threes, each group of 3 are divided up into one of 5 elemental commands, where you have the core solids. I think we have them here. The core solids, and next they had wait a minute. Let me see what I have here. Yeah, they had the core ethers. Then they had the core solids. Then they had liquids. And then they have gases and then vapors. When we get into, this is how we run elemental commands, because it's actually the first structure of templates that occur in the partiki and also on the template level of the partiki bodies. But once we get into a partiki body as opposed to its template, you actually find that where you have one is still the ethers, the first set of 3 are still the ethers. The second set of 3 actually form what are called the flows, or the waters. And so the solid and the liquid actually reverse once you come into that. Why, I don't know, but they did point out that no, we weren't wrong on these diagrams, that's how it's supposed to be. When we do elemental command stands, we still use this structure because it's the core structure of the templates. But once it's in the bodies, you'll see later, it forms where you have the core will end up as the ethers. The next level out, the 3 bands out, will be the flows, or the waters, that are called the aquifers, or the liquid core. And then out from there, the 7, 8, and 9 layers will be the solids, which are called the mantle. And the past that, you have what would be called the atmosphere, which are the gases, or the air. They're also called the wind command. Excuse me. And then beyond that, you would have what are called the vapors, or the fire command, or the flame. So when we talk about elemental commands, they all come again from these layers of the partiki, or the partiki inside the taran, which is a microcosm of the macrocosmic size partiki template of the Rashala bodies. All right, so that was just to show you those, remind you of those. Next one, please. I want to get to the good stuff. Not that this isn't good stuff, but this is just to show you that all those elemental command things, they go on elemental charts that eventually would be our own periodic table of elements that actually show you what's supposed to be there. And there's supposed to be 144 elements. And these aren't finished yet. We're just getting to do them. But we have, as far as the elemental commands, we have they're considered the smaller commands. We have the ethers, the earth, the water, the air, and the fire, and then the larger commands that are considered the master commands that have to do with the core template flows, where the ethers become cloud command. And it has to do with plasmos. The earth becomes the crystal-A command, or the crystal command. The waters becomes the aquale, the flows command. The air becomes the wind song, the eternal wind song, or the wind command. So when we're doing the crystal river stuff and we're calling out to different commands in certain parts of that, this is what we're calling on, these levels of our own being, actually, because we have a smaller version of this creation body that we're a part of. And then up here we have what were the fire commands on the higher, deeper level, the core level, are the flame commands. And when we do elemental stands, there are things you do in like configurations that you stand in and to do different things, to anchor specifically in very specific geometrical formation, the different frequencies that run from each command. And elemental command is learning about being able to direct and work co-creatively with, because you don't boss them around. These are fields of consciousness that you are connected to and that run through your body, and you can learn to work with them. And when you do, a person who has full elemental command would be able to move clouds, would be able to change weather, would be able to change conditions within their body or someone else's, would be able to stop the flows of blood if they saw it, or even if they didn't. I mean, things like that. Elemental command has very practical purposes, but first you have to learn how to work with it and what it is. And it's always co-creative. You're working with larger fields of consciousness than your own, and that you call yourself here in 3D, right? So you're also working with parts of yourself that are that big. But this is where the elemental command stuff fits in with the Partiki templates, or the Partiki templates inside the Taran that become the Partiki templates. No, Partiki templates. Enough of these words drive me crazy. Next one, please. Yeah. We've had so many new words, and this is showing you how these commands, right? These 15 states of matter created by the 5 elemental commands. You had the ethers, the earth, the water, the air, the fire, which is the ether, the solid, the liquid, the gas, and the vapors, right? These two combined, and they do ether solid. These two combined, these solid liquid. These two combined, this liquid gas. These two combined, gas vapor. Then these two combined, you got gas vapor. And you got solid. These two combined, you got solid liquid. These give you the states, right? And each one of these states, this is called the hydroplasm densities, or density 4 states. The ectoplasm densities, density 3 states, that would correspond with the D7, 8, and 9. These would be D10, 11, and 12. The endoplasmic density 2 states, 4, 5, and 6. And these would be the density 1 plasma states, D1, 2, and 3. And there's lots of them down here. Notice they had just 2 combinations. These have 3 combinations. These have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 combinations. These have 6 of them? Wait a minute. 1, 2, 6 combinations. And these have 12. All right? So this is just the beginning of understanding how that plugs into our periodic table of elements. Next one, please. Whoever thought spirituality and ascension would take us here? I mean, I keep going. Somehow I'm going to end up with some kind of interdimensional degree in astrophysics or something without really having tried. This is to just show you, after one key cycle, one tachyon cycle, right, you have, this is where you have the formation of what's called the Rosetta and the seed atom. From the first, let's say, triad that was on that line, the first particle and second particle formed the triad, and from there they formed the Taran, okay? If the triad is on this axis, that's the 0-point axis. Next one is, remember, it sparked enough to form the sparks that formed the Taran body. And remember, the center part of the Taran body was the photogenerator cell of the Partiki. All right, so the Taran body is on axis 1. Every time a thing goes through a flash point and is formed, it does a 45-degree shift in axis rotation. They started over there. So here is the axis of the Taran. That's considered the number 1 axis. Axis 1, that's the 0-point axis over there. At the 9, what would be the 9 position on the Cathara grid? All right. Now, the next one, the Taran is here. Now, here's where we start that incremental size increase from the little tiny Cathara grid in the center, where the triad shape would be. Now, the next one up would be the Taran shape. After the Taran goes through a pulse cycle of 12 harmonic key cycles, a full tachyon cycle, hits tachyon flash point, pops into the creation point source, replicates, comes back out times 2, and rotates 45 degrees, and comes out on axis 2 as what's called the dyad. Dyad goes through a tachyon cycle of 12 harmonic key cycles, pops into its flash point, comes back out again as ×2 replica, which is the myad. This is showing you the clusters of cells, of light cells or radiation cells, as they build up from the first taran. All right, so I'm not going to go through this every time. You can get the idea. Right, so we have the myad, then the monad, or the monos, then the amorea hub cell, on axis 5, then axis 6, we have what's called the divine blueprint. Now, what are these? They're actually counting numbers of particae, okay, because this is still in the particae area. You only have the one particle at the center that was generating all these. So you had 3 particae, you have 6 particae, 3 with 3 in the center, and 3. So 3 and 3 are 6 particae, right? 6 and 6 are 12 particae. This is where we get into seed atoms and things, not seed atoms, light seeds. The difference between the Metatronic ones, because the Metatronic ones turn out to be a 666 here, and there's a lot of places where the 666 shows up in the Metatronic stuff that they don't tell you about. Right? It's supposed to be 636. 3 is the divine constant at the center of the taran, and you have 6 particae and 6 particae that forms the 12 particae. So there are 12 particae of the myad. You have 24 particae of the monad. You have 48 particae of the amorea cell. You have, here's where you start increases. They're not just ×2 anymore. These are ×2 as far as replication when it went into source and then popped out again. All right, the replication ×2. Now you have 48 particae, 48 ×3. There's a ×3 replication starts here. Gives you the 144 particae units of the divine blueprint. That goes in, and it does a ×12 replication, where you have 144 × 12 equals 1,728 particae of what is called the Edon. That's the Edon 1728. All right, and then there's one more, where you got 20,736 particae of the Rashala, and that's on axis 8. That's on axis 7. That's on axis 6, which would be down here. So this just shows you the formation of the cluster that becomes known as, all these put together, because remember, they're all in the same place, on the same center, so they're all like little clusters within clusters within clusters. These all together form what is called the Rosetta, or the 9 layers of the Rosetta, and when that one pops in, and it goes through something that I'm not even going to try to explain now that has to do with the 7th cycle, which isn't a tachyon cycle. It's called a Ruchete cycle that has to do with picking up the keys from the other side on the Adori side. And then a flame cycle that has to do with formation of a flame. And we won't go through this here. We did this in, I believe, Tenerife and probably one of the Sacred Sex workshops too. Okay, but anyway, it goes from there. The next expansion, after it does several things in cycle 7 and 8, it comes back out at axis 1, or 9, because it's the 9th thing it did, as what is called the seed atom. With inside the seed atom, you have the Rosetta, which is this entire cluster. And I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. So that is the seed atom, has 30 cells of the seed atom. These are the first particle cells. All right, so we went from particae and particae units into the creation of the first particle cells. All right, they're bigger and they have more quantum than the smaller particae. Next one, please. Oh, okay. We may be a little late tonight. We may be running just a little late tonight. You know, I really try. I really do try to, but I won't even put out times anymore directly like I used to try to put out an itinerary. No, it just gets me in trouble. Yeah. Anyway, here we are. This is what the Rosetta looks like, this being the outer cluster, right, of the 20,736, was it? Right, going down inward to all of them. When you put them all together, it creates the Rosetta. And these are clusters that you'd actually see all of the balls through each other. They're energy balls. They're spheres within spheres within spheres. It's a really beautiful cluster. And that is the Rosetta cluster inside of the seed atom. And this seed atom is called the unisized seed atom. It is the first of 1, 2, 3 seed atoms that form in something called the krystar cycle. But right now we're at, this part of it is called the starborn cycle. Up to this point, where you saw all those little things be created with their do a tachyon cycle, pop in, come out, double, that kind of thing. That is called the starborn cycle. So there's a seed cycle before it where the taran is created. Then you have the starborn cycle. Now there's another cycle that comes after this. This is where you find out where your Rashala buddy comes from. Next one, please. Excuse me. What happens after axis 9? After the seed atom is created? what happens next? I always knew that there was something that happened next because everything comes in 12s and 15s and we got 9. Why? Right? What happened to the rest of them? What about the 9 inner layers? Yes, vaguely remembered that one. So it was like I knew something came, but for ages we couldn't get any of what it was. It just wasn't being released, actually. The next thing that happens, so you have, number 1, you'd have the Sita cycle where the Taran is born. Number 2, you'd have the star-born cycle up to creation of the seed atom. Then, the seed atom phases, the little balls, it's 30 little balls, it's just like the Taran, expanded and contracted, or contracted and expanded. When it contracts, it sparks. Its little balls rubbed together and it makes sparks. Well, the same thing happens with the seed atom. It makes sparks. And it does, I believe, they didn't say how many, but I think it's a set of 12, just like it was with the Taran, of 12 contraction, expansion, each time making sparks in the center of the seed atom. And I have a feeling it's at the 13th, because there's something with prana exchange that has to do with 13. The 13th contraction and expansion pops open the center point, and the whole thing goes back into source and replicates, right, again. And it comes back out in a very interesting way. This is what starts what's called the life-born cycle. So we had the star seed cycle where the seed was, the Sita cycle where the Taran was created, the light seed cycle. Then we had the star-born cycle. Now we have the life-born cycle. And this is where, once it pops in, once the seed atom and everything pop in, then they called it the 6 cracks, the 6 pops, and a little bang, which is the bing, bong, boom. Right? This is before the Big Bang science talks about. Okay? Right. So you have your seed atom. It goes in to source and replicates its quantum, getting ready to pop back out again with a bit more thrust this time. Kind of like winding up for a pitch. Right? And it comes back out in the first 6 cracks, where it goes 6 expansions. All right. These are expansions that come this way, the embedded way, as opposed to the spiraling ones that are offset, right? This is where you have like 1, 2, 3, there would be 4, 5, 6. It just wouldn't have fit on here if I tried to put it here. And what it ends up giving you is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers. Okay. These become the first inner layers of the Partiki template. Then, after you have the 6 cracks, that's formed from the 6 cracks. The next thing are the 6 pops, or pillars of power. All right? That contracts back in and pops back out again. But this pops out in a different way. It's still an expansion, but it has different... it has different increments of expansion, but they end up giving you the same proportions as you would from a Partiki template, and there's 15 layers. It ends up giving you the same proportions but on a large scale. And the 6 pops create, I think they went from the center out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 was on the outside. These go 1, and then 2 comes inside of it, and then 3, 4, 5, 6. So the first pop actually ends up out here, an expansion, and these expand within it, right? So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and at the center you have that. That has given you 12 layers, right? So you've now got 12 layers. Then there's another thing that happens. Oh, and at the center point here, there is a little thing called the krystala that forms, which is like a little unit that holds in itself the little Christ encryption. Next one, please. This is how your Partiki body gets born, which is the core structure of your Rashale body. So the next one is, after you have the 6 cracks that form the center and the 6 pops that form the outer 6 layers, then you have the little bang, which is the bing, bang, boom. And it goes bing, bang, boom. And this is where the whole bunch of them only partially pull in to source, and then you go coming back out, right? But it's a bing, bang, bong. No, it's actually a bing, bong, boom. Yes, must get our tones right. Bing, bong, boom. And that gives you 3 more layers of this type of expansion, right? The point-to-line expansion as opposed to the spiral proportions, right? Gives you that form of expansion. And that creates 13, 14, and 15 layers, all right? So what you have by the end of all this, can we see the next one, please? Finally, we're getting into the ones that drove me crazy all morning. This is the partiki, biggie, partiki template. The 15 gel layers and the 15 crystal bands of the partiki template. All right, these are the ones, the 1 through 6 were the center ones. They were formed by the 6 cracks, right? The 7 through 12 were formed by the 6 pops, or pillars of power expansions. And the last 3 were formed by the little bang, the bing, the bong, and the boom. Right? That gives you the template, the partiki template. They are spheres, but right now we're dealing with spheres that have, they're called gel layers and crystal bands. These become interesting. What these become as the partiki template becomes the partiki body, because they change words. The shape stays the same, but they change words. So this is the life-born cycle, stage 1, the partiki template forms. 6 cracks, 6 pops, and a little bang. All right, that gives you that. Now here again, you have an aurea, dark light, and sound field. Okay? Anything else I need to point out on here? No. Again, you have the same words, right? The same from the nada going all the way up to the ra on the outside. They're the same words for the layers and for the bands. All right? Remember? The 9 layers going in, and these would be the ones going out. And these are scribbled, but they're the names of the bands. All right? Yeah, I have them written down here again, too. You don't have to reread those for now. But it's showing you the same thing that we went over as far as the name tones. And those names have to do with the tonal resonance, or the core vibration, BPR, of each of those gel layers. So that's where the names come from. They're not just pulled out of a hat. They have to do with the verbal translation you can make of those sound vibrations. Next one. Is this the next one? Oh, yeah. That's just to show you that what you just saw is the same thing when we looked at this before in relation to the partiki inside of the taran. It's the same structure, and it creates the same elemental divisions or elemental forces. You have the 15 orbitas, crystal bands, and the 15 gelesic layers. Next one, please. Now, here we go. Life-born cycle, which is number 3, right? Or number 2 was the star-born cycle. Number 3 is life-born cycle. Now we're on stage 2. The partiki template was stage 1. The partiki body is stage 2. And this is created by the first pillar of power phase pulse. So on the partiki template, it had those little spheres that form the cross that we call the pillar of power. That contracted, right? So those spheres sparked, and the inner part of it sparked. And in that sparking, it replicated some parts of itself, back out again, and reproduced this, which is in the same place and in the same space, but like a different layer added right onto the layer that was there. You have what's called the partiki body, and you have 15 gel sphere rings. These are called rings. All right, so when we're activating the rings or opening the rings, this is what we're relating to. The rings are the next level up translation of what were the layers, all right, in the template. So you go layers, rings, and you go what used to be the crystalline bands become spans, all right, which are crystal orbs. And they're of the partiki body, where in the partiki template, the stage right before, you had gelesic layers and crystalline bands. When we talk about spanner gates, we're talking about activating these portions of the body fields, and they are gates that actually run through this deep into the templates behind the outer matter manifestations. All right, so you have 15 rings and 15 spans. Now at the center here, you also have what is called, where it was just the krystala, now you have the it's called the ita-ur core. So a little ita-ur radiation point forms in the center of the krystala. All right. And again, you have the same names. They're the same names, but now they're called rings and spans. Rings being the things here, and in between you have the spans because they span one another. And there's actually something really intense that happens with them, where the layers from the one before it split half and half to form. I mean, there's a lot of technicals that go between that stage and this that we don't need to understand, as long as we understand that at this level we have rings and spans. But they start moving. The type of Jaleesic radiation they're holding starts to switch off, where half of this will go to there and half of this will go to there, and it makes more and more types of Jaleesic radiation currents, basically, or fields that later become currents. What we also have here is at this stage where the Partiki body forms from the Partiki template that was the stage before, which would be stage 1 of the life-born cycle. This is stage 2. This is where we get alons, shalons, and kalons, where they are a set of 12 primary crystals. These are crystal structures that form actually crystalline structures in the bands. Each of these lines here becomes what before we used to call them fire lines, just like you have in the Partiki, right? The fire lines, right? On the Partiki template, they're called fire lines, but or key lines. But here they become fire chambers. And what fires in the fire chambers are the alon, kalon, and shalon sets. But there's also out here in this band, you have the oron shield, or the oron unit sets, right? They have to do with the Aurea field out here, the dark light field, and the Ra field here. And the band that they form is the Aura band. So you have orons that form here. All right. Now, the kalon, shalons, and alon names come from where they originally formed in the Partiki of the Taran, where before they got to the bands that they're in, the kalons formed on the K, on the band between the Ka and the La fields, the Kala band, right? The shalons formed between the Sha and the La. The alons did a whole bunch of things during key resolution to get that name. All right, I'm not even going to try to explain what that was. Had to do with the J being silent and them being Jalas and Jalons and things. Anyway, in this point, this is where you go from having those being little tiny things that the keys are doing to in the larger structure of the Partiki body that you would, in terms of your personal anatomy, it would be around you and running through you, not just a little tiny thing inside of you. These become literal shields of crystalline things with 12 primary points that are aligned in the 12 primary fire lines. And at the center now, you also have an eta or unit. Something happens with that eta or unit in the next phase that allows for these three things to come together, where the alon pulls up into the shalon, the kalon pulls down into the shalon, and they fertilize, just like sperm and egg coming together. And when they come together, all sorts of things have to do with opening up all of these fire chambers happen, and it begins the process of what's called prana exchange. Next one, please. Show you where you get your prana seed first. And then I have to let you go for dinner. Oh, boy. Oh, yeah, this is another layer before we got to prana exchange. Oh, no, here's where prana exchange happens. Now, we're still at the life-born cycle, which is number 3 after starborn number 2. We're at stage 3. This is still the Partiki body, but this is the 5 elemental planes that form from those 15 rings and 15 spans. Right, trying to get my spans, my bands, my layers, my rings straight. Right, but I said that right this time. I've been struggling over that in the 12 tribes classes, but it's getting clearer as we go. So we have stage 3, Partiki body, 5 elemental planes, and the prana seed. Now these are formed by created by the first ASCO conception pulse. So at the first point in time, from whatever, there's something that triggers the alons, kalons, and shalons to come together and fire, open the fire tubes, and everybody pulls into the center and sparks the center where the eta or is, right? And it causes the eta or to split. And everything pulls in for a second and comes back out, and it separates things out into 5 planes that still have their layers running through them. Or no, they're not layers here. No, they're not. They're rings. They have their rings and their spans running through them. But at the center, here's the point where, when the 5 planes form, or when those 15 sets break into sets of 3, you end up with what was the eta or at the center splitting and leaving a hole in the center where it was. The hole is called the Iran point. It splits into 3 ether units. One is called the Iran, or the Ira. One is called the prana key, and one is called the prana chi. Now, if you put these two, prana ki and prana chi, back together, you'd end up with a prana. That, in fact, that's what it sparks. It sparks prana. And if remember, prana is a base 11 2/3 positive charge radiation unit. All right? So these aren't equally distributed, though. You have to take the 11 2/3 of positive of prana, divide it by 3, take one of those out to be the prana chi, which would be the negative charge one, and the other two together would be the prana ki as far as quantum goes. And I don't have that in my head, and I don't have it written down, but it gives you the idea. If you put them two together, you get a full 11 2/3 prana unit. And when they come together and spark, just like partikai spark, they make prana sparks. And those prana sparks are backflow sparks that go back to source. They go back through the Iran point. And what's on the other side of that Iran point? At this point, does anybody remember what's in there? What's in there? What's in there next is a seed atom, right? Down to the next layer. Well, you go through the partiki, but you're at the partiki body. You go through into the partiki template, and then through that into the seed atom. And that, of course, goes all the way back to the star-born cycle, back to the tarn. Well, the backflow goes from the prana seed Iran point back in, and it creates something called the prana exchange, where prana is exchanged for a mana outflow. And mana outflow starts the flow of prana in, mana out, prana in, mana out. And that creates all sorts of neat things that happen on the key lines that allows for these key lines in the A-line, Shay-line, K-line sets to perpetually go through fertilization, conception, and rebirthing their quantum to continually feed the structures of the thing. This is what happens when we breathe, what's supposed to happen when we breathe, but doesn't anymore because we have not been able to have phasing of the prana seed since 15,400 BC. And what has just happened on the sun is these three of their prana seed, which are their core gates on a solar level, have compacted into one. And it means Bardo has started, because Bardo is, be it for a person or a planet, when the prana seed completely closes the Iran point, which separates the partiki bodies and the outer bodies and the prana seed from the seed atom behind it. And at that point, the flows of current that were coming out of the seed atom directly from source can no longer come. Those flows that come from the Rosetta, the 9 layers of the Rosetta, are called the Antankarana flows that form the 9-dimensional Antankarana current. And then you have the ones from the outer currents that come with that too. That flow stops and the Antankarana line breaks when the prana seed phase locks and closes, and that is what has happened in the core of the sun on March 25th. So what we are going to do is assist that to not happen on this planet, at least not yet, because usually all the planets will follow suit with their sun when that occurs. The next phase after that, after a number of years, we've got about 1,000 years on this, all right, before the next phase of Bardo is entered. We entered Bardo phase of fall for the sun, and the next phase is nova. But we've got 1,000 years before that phase sets in. Now there may be, they haven't said whether there could be 10,000 years from start of nova to where it actually goes boom. I don't know. But they said we've got basically 500 to 1,000 years to be able to run host from this system for anything out. And at that point, they have to pull the Anshatesa passage line out, because when it novas here, it would take out that system if that host line was still in. So there's a period now, a limited period of time, by which hosts can be taken from the system into, back into the ascension creation systems, or even into other black hole falls if they're already a fallen race or something that would prefer to go home to their home matrix. Say if they're Wisadraks and they want to go back to Wisadrak. There's only a certain period of time now that anything can come out, because once the host line from the Anshatesa passage and the aqueous matrix is pulled out, so they don't nova with the sun, this becomes a closed quarantine system that is going space dust rapidly at that point. But we got at least 500 to 1,000 years, they said, depending on how it goes. So anyway, I think, I'll let him go to dinner as soon as we're ready. So anyway, here we are back here again with the prana seed, all right? And we can just see the top of this, and I think I can come up from this after. So right here we are at the partiki body with the 5 elemental planes and the prana seed. And these are we're still dealing with the 15 rings and the 15 spans or crystal orbs. Spans or crystal orbs. So if you ever see anything on TV that has to do with people orbing, right, where they pop into this light ball and and they can disappear and reappear at other places. There was one thing I saw with a little baby who actually did it. It was on Charmed, I think, one of those little TV shows. And the baby just blew out this orb, right, because somebody was trying to hurt it, right? And they call it orbing. Well, there is a reality to orbing. Orbing has to do with activating the spans, which are the crystal orbs that are these in the Rashalay body. Because the next thing that will happen, that we'll deal with after we come back from dinner, because I'm already over the 10 minutes I was supposed to not keep you to, right? Sorry. The next phase will be getting into the Rasha layers of this. And all these things are actually the Partiki template, the Partiki body, and what comes after it are part of the bodies we call the Rasha bodies. And that's, of course, you have this whole thing happens 4 times to give you the Rashala, the Rasha A, the Rashala, the Rashali, and the Rashalay bodies. All right, so we'll see that when we come back. And then we'll see how it plugs into the planet as well. All right. Thank you. Have a good dinner. Come back at 8:30? 8:30? At me to make while we were up there. It's really funny trying to do graphs when you don't have a glue stick. We didn't have a glue stick. We got one for tonight's session, but we were using staples to put paste ups on, yeah, and then photocopying them, and yeah, so that's always fun. But anyway, we're off to. I'm actually pleased. I've got the sequence together to where by the time it's time to do the journey, you will know what the journey means, right? And you'll also understand the connection between the Rashalay body and, well, the Rasha's body, the Rasha bodies and the Rashalay body, all the way from the first creation sequence that we started with, up into the levels of the atmosphere and the levels down below your feet in the Earth's crust and the vertical maps. So we will get that far, and that's when you'll be ready to go on a journey to the Adashi Temple. It's Adashi Temple 7. 7 is the only temple that's accessible at this point. All of the Adashi temples connect to the arc hub gates here, or the arc gate sites. So arc 7, it connects to Adashi 7 temple. All of the other ones at this point cannot be activated on the Earth level because of the corruption of the Earth's grids, and something we'll talk about more tomorrow, but a little bit today about hibernation zones. But if we're successful in getting Arc 7 and Spanner 7 that connects to Adashi 7 fully opened, we will be able to run all of the other Arc Hub gates off of Arc 7 and Spanner 7. So, yeah. So even though their spanners can't open, they can all be directed in to Spanner 7, so there is still an out wherever people are on the planet. It's a lot easier to get to 12 different sites as opposed to 1, right? And the thing is, once we learn how to glide, first of all, before we slide, we glide, and that's where we learn how to Rashalay project to the temples, and the first access key journey will be tonight. Once we learn how to do that, it doesn't matter where you are on the planet. You will have already awake in your Rashalay bodies the coding, the mathematical coding that is a coordinate coding that will bring you directly through Spanner 7 up to Adashi 7. So you will it's kind of like having an automatic map, like a beam, that wherever you are and you want it to find you, it can, but only if you want it to. So I'm going to get into the graph sequence, and I'll probably go on like 78 speed again, where I'm talking 500 miles an hour, it sounds like. But that's all right. I only kind of do that as you guys' frequency picks up too. So it's like you hear faster as I speak faster. I noticed that. And it doesn't matter if you hear every word. And the funny thing is, I don't do that on purpose. That is when the transmission wave is coming through, as far as the data wave coming in live, that things I'm just learning and looking at on paper going, oh my God, what was that 3 pages back, and how does that go here? It just comes out because it's already sequenced in my Rashalay body, so it just kind of falls out, and it just is a wave of information that we can all catch, and that's why it picks up sometimes and goes really fast. Since there's not a huge amount of time to do the 30 graphs that are left in the sequence, and we want to be able to get to that hour and 45-minute journey tonight, so you're still somewhat awake. It's all right if you fall asleep up there, but you do need to get your body back to your hotel room at some point. The thing that I talked about, which we'll talk about more tomorrow, that involves this, it is an art glass piece that was made, I think, someplace in Pennsylvania, because Mac bought it for us just as a gift, and it was a perfect gift because the Beloveds have been using it for all of the 12 tribes things as the anchor point for, what is it, for the flows? They anchor the water flows with that, right? Yeah. And it's been used in every one of the activations that the 12 Tribes classes have been doing, as well as some interesting things we've been doing at our house that is keyed to Shalon 7 and Shala 13. So it's already very charged. I noticed some things happening after 12 Tribes 3 class, after the third class, where at strange times it flashes happen inside of it, which I've never seen before. It's not just, oh, the light caught that. It was like there was a flash that came from inside of it and went out, not something that reflected and bounced. Right? What? Did you see it up? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there was a distinct flash. I saw one come out when I was sitting on the table in the kitchen. I kind of went, whoa, did I just see that? And they went, yes, you did. So they have been charging this progressively with the frequencies that are associated with the, well, now with the Ansha Tesa passage, and of course the crystal river is what they started charging it with, and then they added to that the arc of Aquarii frequencies from the outer domains of the aqueous matrix, and now it is also running it's an anchoring point really for the full aqualene transmission. And it's funny because they've had us use this as a visual, and you'll be able to see it a little bit closer and see the movement of the heliotalic light and stuff inside of it, that even as a piece of art glass, it was created with that in it. It's a very special piece. I'd like to meet the artist someday. But they have been having us use the image of this, but imagine it as they call it the fire water flame. Imagine that it's a flame of wet fire, cool, wet fire. And this has to do with the aqualene sun core flame that will activate within once we begin the first prana exchange, the first phase of the prana seed. It will activate within the part of your seed atom. It's like right the next level out from your seed atom where your prana seed is. So it will begin that process. And that begins the process of allowing the Rashale body layers to activate with the 3 matrix currents as opposed to just the smaller ones that would be just from this current. So, from this matrix. So we're going to pass this around to save time. And they have said that because there's not time nor necessity, as they said, to run the second journey for this workshop. What you need is the access key journey, which is the first one. All right, and we've only done 2 journeys so far with the 3 tribe classes, because 1 tribe will activate. So journey 1 actually goes with tribe 1 class, but tribe 1 class activated the ring. The ring doesn't consummate until the next class. So it's the next class that gets to use the journey that went with the activation of the one before. So we're only on 2 levels of full opening now. We're waiting in the 3rd class. In class 4, they will have ring 3 opening, so there will be another journey. But there was an important part in the 2nd journey that was to the 2nd floor of Adashi 7 Temple, and that was we were given the I forget what they called them, the fire water crystal keys in our right palm. Little tiny, look like micro crystals, kind of like this color, and these were the things that will give. If you just gently rub the chakra in the palm, and you don't have to take them if you don't want them, but up in those journeys, if you wanted them, you just kind of like hold out your hand to your advisor person, and they would give you the transmission of them. It's the beginning of the aqualene transmission directly, and after that point, you can activate this flame thing inside of your Iran point, which is the center point of the prana seed, and as the rings and what goes with rings? Orbs, spans, open in the indigo shield, we will progressively be able to activate corresponding layers of the Rashale bodies with the aqualene sun, which is that transmutation buffer field that will allow the radiation that's going to be coming from the sun here to be transmuted and actually used for health purposes. So what I'm going to do is, they said you can get, because we're not going to take the other hour and a half or so that it takes to do journey 2, right? Journey 1 is the important one as far as getting there. We were going to pass this around. We're going to do it while I'm going through the graphs, because there's so many people, it'll take forever if we do a separate thing for that. When it comes to you, just try to be careful not to break it, because it is fragile. Don't drop it on anything hard. And just hold it for a second. They're saying hold it in the right hand if you would like to receive the transmission of the aqualene transmission crystals and fire water crystals. I forget what they called them in the tribe class. I'd have to go look it up. But if you'd like to just hold it in the right hand and simply, kind of give silent permission, yes, please, and just inhale, and it'll actually come up from the right hand into the center of your prana seed, and you will have it. And at that point, if you want to just look at it and don't want to receive that, or if you don't feel you're ready to receive that, or you're scared of us or something like that, and you don't trust us fully, that's all right. Just hold it in your left hand, and it won't do anything, and you can hold it in your left hand and just look at it if you'd like to. But if you want to hold it in a way that you will get the transmission, first you put it in your right hand, and you do have to just mentally say, yes, please, I would like it. All right, you won't be given the transmission. It won't come through them, through the crystal, unless you want it. So you do need to mentally ask, and just an inhale once you ask, and you will get a little download of these little micro crystals that are this color. It's also a fascinating piece to look at. I think we'll start just over here and just go this way, row to row, if we can, so we can pass across to you for the first one. Is that all right? And then just work toward the back as we go through the graph sequences. So we'll start. Sid's ready. He's in the second seat. So here you go. All right, just give it to who's next, who's on the end, right? All right, and try not to hold it too long, just so, you can look at it a bit after you get your transmission, but try to, so we get through all these people. There's over 200 people here, so it's a lot of hands to pass through. 2 minutes per person is 2 hours. You're very good with math. Let's try. Well, yeah, 2 hours is good. We have about 2 hours to have, yeah. Okay. All right. In the meantime, I'm going to pick up where we left off so we can get through the point of understanding the Rashtralaya body, because we just got through the Partiki template and the Partiki body and the prana seed formation. And next we'll go into the Rashas. Let me see where they fit into this chain of creation. Here we go again. I think I'm going to take my, I'm getting heats already. Hold on a second. Can you hold that, honey, please? I just got to take this off. Alrighty, let's go and see if I remember what this is. Oh, okay, we're still now. Remember, the starborn cycle was number 2, right? After you had the star seed cycle and the starborn cycle. Now we're on number 3, the life-born cycle, and that's where you get into the Partiki dark matter templates. This is stage 3. We had stage 1 and stage 2. Now we're on stage 3. That is the 5 elemental density planes of the Partiki body. All right, this becomes important when not only do we have the 15, what are they, rings? Yes, 15 gel rings and the 15 crystal orbs or spans of the Partiki body. They also divide into 5 elemental density planes, which are like the templates for the densities in the outer domains once things go into outer manifestation. So you have the layers 1, or not layers, they are rings here. Rings 1, 2, and 3 in the center would form the first density. 4, 5, and 6, the second. 7, 8, and 9, the third. 10, 11, and 12, the fourth. And then 13, 14, and 15, the fifth. So you would have each one of those is an elemental density plane of the Partiki body. And the way they work in the Partiki body is different than the Partiki template and the Partiki template, whereas in the Partiki and Partiki body, Partiki template and Partiki of the Taran, you would have your ethers as the first density, and then you would have your solids, and then your liquids, and then your gases and your vapors. Here, once it's in the Partiki body form, you end up with density 1 being what's called the solid core, and it's actually frozen ethers. All right. In density 2 level, you have what's called the aquifers, or the liquid core. All right. The third density, which would be the 7, 8, and 9, you'd have the mantle, which would be the solids, the 3 layers of the mantle. The Ta 7 layer, which would be the lower mantle, the middle mantle, which is Ma 8, and the Ka 9 upper mantle. Now, going into the next density, density 4, you would have this is actually getting into the light fields. You'd have the gases here, or the air. You would have here in the 5th density what is called the coronosphere. This would be the atmosphere, and this would be the coronosphere, all right, which is flaming. It is the fire layer of the elemental bands, and it corresponds to the vapors. So we have frozen ethers at the center. We have the frozen core, and you have the flaming ethers, which are vapors, as the outer layer. If you think of this in terms of, say, a sun, it's the same way, or a planet. The only thing missing on our planet right now is a coronosphere. If you think of the sun, and when you see pictures of the sun or whatever that are in like space books and that kind of stuff, and you see that burning layer of gases and things, that would be part of the coronosphere. And beneath that you would have the atmosphere layers, and beneath that you would have the solids of the solar body and the 3 layers of the mantle, and then there would be a liquid core, and then there would be a solid inner core. All right, this applies to the Earth as well, except our coronosphere has been turned off because of the distortions in the planetary body. So when we're looking at these in terms of, first of all, the creation sequence of going from the particle levels into the particle levels, which are these are parts, actually, they're the inside parts of the Rasha bodies. They also correspond directly to what manifests physically in terms of, planets, or including your own body. Tonight, when we're done with all of this and you're doing the journey, I have to go upstairs and plug all of these into the body structure, the little physical body on its Cathara grid, and see where these fit. So I'm going to have a long night ahead of me. But we do have them on the planetary level. So we're getting through just understanding the structure of the Partiki dark matter templates in order to understand Rashalay, Rashalay, Rashala, Rashali, all of those, the Rashas. And it will also give us the understanding we need to understand what we're actually walking around in and on here. When you look at this layer here, it is between density 3 and density 4. All right, this is the outer mantle, or the upper mantle, right? Now that's one of the rings, okay, that corresponds to the layers in the Partiki template. All right. Now between each of the layers, this is a layer. This would be a ring layer, and this would be a ring layer 10 Ra. In between them, you have the Ra Ka, all right, which would be a band in the template, but it is an orb or a span in the body level. Now it is on that level that you'll actually have what is called the crust, or the surface. So there is a surface crust that forms, and this has to do with the kalons. Remember we talked about the kalons, alons, and shalons that formed when the Partiki body formed. So we have here, we have kalons, alons, and shalons. They correspond to kalons, would actually be in the crust. They're formed out here, which would be out in the atmosphere, and then they descend and store in this layer. And that layer, as far as a planetary body goes, would correspond to the crust layer of the planet. So the plates that they talk about, the tectonic plates and the crust and the stuff that we build stuff on and the stuff that is under the ocean as the ocean floor, that part of it would actually hold the kalon shield. Below that, when we go down between the upper mantle and the middle mantle, there would be a band of crystalline structure that held the shalons. All right, this would be the shalon layer, and that's at the Kama layer, the Ka and the Ma, right? Ka 9, Ma 8, the Kama layer, and that's considered 8.5 at layer. And then here we would have the alons, and the alons are ones that hold the jewels. And there's a point, I don't know if we're going to get into this. They've given me more sophisticated stuff on the formation of alons, kalons, and shalons, and keys and all of that isn't integrated yet, but it appears that the alons that are part of a mata ore, when they go from being keys in the Partiki template of the, back in the Taran, when they come out into the Partiki template and the Partiki bodies, they go from mata ores to meta ores. So we end up with metals holding the jewels here in this layer between the middle and the lower mantles. And this has to do with the different things you can mine in the body of a planet or a star. With the jewels, the gemstone, crystal stones, with the metals that are present. All right. So there are layers of these that correspond with alon, shalon, and kalon. And when key fertilization occurs, part of the jewels rise up into the shalons, and the kalons drop down, and fertilization occurs, and these lines that aren't shown on this diagram open. We're going to talk more about that tomorrow. I'm just learning that stuff, and I don't have the diagrams done yet. But they will show us what that has to do with prana exchange and what it means to begin to get that going again. We can also look at these templates as we're going through these templates of the Partiki templates of the Rasha bodies. Also realize that, yes, they're huge ones that the cosmos is structured on. They're also, every time you see a solar system, it will have it set. Every little object in the solar system will have it set. Every person has it set. But every atom in every person also has this structure. So this is the structure of atoms as well, where there's a certain part of this, and I think I'll have some of that tomorrow, where it would be the nucleus, right? And the things like the protons and the neutrons that are in the nucleus of atoms. And then certain things out here would correspond to the electron rings. In fact, I know this for a fact, the eighth band or the eighth span or orb corresponds to the eighth electron orbit around atoms here. So there are actually these other things that you don't see electrons floating around in. All right, so it corresponds, when you're doing activations in the larger body structures of the Rasha, you're also doing them right down into the atoms that you're composed of. And it's kind of funny because the first time I realized something was going on directly with atoms was after we did the first journey with the second class. And the first person I saw, actually kind of looked at after the workshop and kind of looked at him, and I saw but he was all little pink dots. I was like, I didn't see his 3D shape. I saw his shape as if it were a silhouette, and all the atoms, and they all had a little pink ring around them. And we just got done going through what were called the pink sapphire caverns that have to do with ring 1, right? I was going, whoa, look at that. And then I kind of went, oh, cool, I'm doing it too. I didn't realize that it was happening in my own body. I'm so used to heat flashes and all sorts of wacky stuff, when I'm running line for workshops. But it was noticeable without even looking for it. Just like it was almost so 3D that my physical eyes almost caught it. It was that close. I wasn't even doing an astral scan to see anything. So as we're activating the larger bodies and assisting the planet or holding a host right now for the planet to hold this field in the planetary bodies, eventually, once we get through with Peru, which will allow this host to allow the beloveds to anchor enough frequency where they can kind of kickstart the Earth's Rashale body into somewhat kind of respirator activation, where we can at least hold the passages open and allow for prana. The first time this planet will be able to have done a prana exchange, which is like core breathing, since 15,400 BC, when certain things happen that we'll talk about tomorrow. So all of these things are connected. As you see these little circle diagrams, more balls within balls. But these balls are directly in a sequence of the creation sequence. We're now at level 3, which is the life-born cycle in stage 3, and that's when we get the 5 elemental density planes of the Partiki body, and that's where we have the Kalon, Alon, and Shalon shields, or the ASK, the Ask shields, as we call them. And out here, you would have the O, which is the Oron level of these. So each of the 12 fire lines would have one of those crystals, and then there are little bits of those crystals that run those particular orb spans. So they're literally crystalline spheres around us that have 12 primary points, and those points actually circle, which I won't get into. They form shields and all that kind of stuff. These are the things that actually form the shields we talk about in the outer bodies. Right? But that's even more complicated stuff that you don't need to know right now. Maybe by tomorrow. But anyway. All right. So level 3, life-born cycle, stage 3. What's the next one, darling? Help me. Here we go. Okay. Yes, this was some of the new stuff. All right. This is called the Rasha Amore body 3-dimensional template. 60 fields and 60 shields. 4 sheaths. Okay. After we had the Partiki body in its 5 elemental planes, this thing is created by the first phase of the Partiki body prana seed. So the first time the prana seed at the core of the one before goes and sparks and releases, sparks a prana unit and sends that as backflow. Then there's thing that happens again. Yeah. Now, they said this outer sphere they call this the Rasha body, and they call it Rashas right now because it depends on which domain you're in, whether it's a Rasha La, whether it's a Rasha Li, or a Rasha Le. And sometimes when you get into the Adashi cycles, it's the Rishas, right? So they just refer to these in the Akashi cycles, which are the outgoing cycles, as the Rasha body. All right, this one is the same size and place as the Partiki body and template. So what you saw on the diagram before, that's that 15-layer thing, this is here, all right? Now, each one of these, all right, this Kathara grid here represents the Ettore level of this sphere, Rasha sphere. This here represents the Adore level. So here's where you get Ettore and Adore. Put them together and you have Amore. All right? Love. That's what they call them. It actually is the Amore body, has its male and female aspect, the Adore and the Ettore. It's cute, isn't it? I mean, that's Amore. I keep thinking of when the moon hits your eye like a big piece of pie, and I go, what? Yeah. But they haven't named these this way to be funny. They're the actual names of them. And a lot of these things, in no matter what language they've ever been taught in, they are pronounced the same way. So whatever alphabet would give those sounds would be the spelling of them. But they are pronounced this way. So amore, and that's where the concept of amore is love, and I believe it's Italian, isn't it? The Italian language, yeah. Came from, and it has to do with the Ettore and the Adore. The Ettore is the male aspect of the energy bodies, or the Rasha bodies, and the Adore is the female aspect. And that has to do with the polarity, positive charge, negative charge, counterclockwise spin, clockwise spin. So they're both in the same sphere. One sphere spinning clockwise, which would be the Ettore, and the Adore spinning counterclockwise. So they exist together. So when we talk about the Adore side of our creation, we're talking about our very near neighbors. They're in the same place as we are, but they're on an opposite particle spin. That doesn't mean it's a negative particle spin in the sense of bad. It just means that they are actually, where we go clockwise, they go counterclockwise. And when our systems turn around and go counterclockwise, theirs go clockwise. So we're just on counterspin with each other. But what this is, with this Rasha Amore body, meaning Ettore and Adore combined, right? You have the outer one, and that's the Rasha. But then you have got three more. 1, 2, and 3. So first, this is actually the first one. It says this comes from the first phase cycle engaged by the prana seed at the core of the Partiki body. All right, it creates the Rasha Amore body. It's a 4-pulse expansion. All right, so pulse 1. So pulse is contraction, expansion, contraction, expansion, contraction, expansion. All right, pulse 1 creates the Rasha 15 set Amore density body. So pulse 1 is the one outside. So the first pulse comes out and does that. These others come out inside of it, right? So this was the first pulse, and it creates the fourth body, which when you're looking at them and counting them out is the fourth body out. All right, that is considered the density body, or the density template. These represent the three-dimensional templates within inside of them. This is the structure when you look at Huva bodies in relation to radial bodies on the outer creation. This is where these templates are set. So we have this is beginning to understand what your Rasha body and your Rasha lay body on the outer is structured upon. You have, and if you remember that the Partiki body is the same size of this, so all of those things with the Partiki body, which were the primary 15 rings and 15 rings and orbs, orb spans, which are the things between, they're running through here, right? And all of the things with the fire chambers and all that, they're running through here. But this is the next layer of it, same size, but it has 4, not just the 1, but 2, 3, and 4, has 4 15 set templates. So that one 15 set template that had the 15 orbs between and the 15 rings, each Kathara grid here, 1, 2, 3, and 4, has a set of 15. So you've got 4 sets of 15 on each side, Adore and Ettore. So it gives you now they call them fields. What were the rings become fields. And at this level, there are 60 fields, where there were 15 rings in the partiki body behind this, like as the layer before this. Now you have 60 fields, because it's the 15 times 4. Same with the shields. The shields, what used to be the orb spans, or the spans, become the shields. So we have 60 fields and 60 shields of the Rasha Amore body, 3-dimensional template. So this is stage 4 of the life cycle, which is the life cycle is the creation of the partiki templates as differentiated from the partikai templates that go up to the seed atom. Then you have the partiki templates that between the template, the partiki template, the partiki body, and the Rasha Amore bodies, you have the structure of your Rasha bodies happening. This is they're all part of the Rasha bodies. Now there's something that happens after this. It's like it never ends. Oh, and at the center here, you still have one krystala with one prana seed that has its Iran point, all right, at the core, and that unites all of these bodies with all of the other layers, and that prana seed and its Iran opening, that opening connects to the seed atom of the partikai level of creation. All right, so I think that's how I have to do. Yeah, so, pulse 1 creates the outer one, which is body number 4 when you count outward. Pulse 2 creates the D3 atmospheric mental template. Okay, mental body template, D3 atmosphere template. Pulse 3 creates the D2 elemental telluric emotional, which is what we perceive as physical when our consciousness is stationed in the 3rd dimensional level. Creates that D2 template here. And then the pulse 4 creates the D1 etheric atomic template for the etheric atomic body, and that would be here. So these are literally the templates upon which the 3-dimensional structure of your Huva bodies manifest. Next one, please. This is just showing, now, there are 4 of these together, right? We had 4 Kathara grids together, and I said each one of them had their 15 layers, or 15 shields. No, they have 15 I'm not sure how to word that. There's 60 shields and fields, but they basically have their 15 structure. I'll just use it that way. They have their 15 structure, rings, and I'll call them rings. I'll use the template words. Rings, or the partiki body words. Rings and orbs, or spans. Okay. Now, if you just look at 2 of these together, where you had the D2 level one that corresponded to what we would see as physical, let's say, and then you have the D3 one that would correspond to what we see, what we would perceive here as our mental bodies. That implies that there would be a D1 level etheric atomic set in here, and that there would be that bigger density level. When we use our density Kathara grid and those kind of things, and some of the techniques we've done, there would be another one where its crossbar would be here and its points would go up there. All right, this structure becomes important later when we're looking at Earth in relation to Eartha. All right, but for now, we're still looking at the life-born cycle. It's stage 4. This is the D2 and the D3 templates looked at close up, where you can start to see where you had 15, the 15 structure of D2. So that goes up to 12, and then you'd have 13, 14, 15. Then you have the 15 structure of the D3 grid. Each of them have the same names for their rings and spans, or the shields and fields that correspond to them. They're the same names, starting with the nada at the center, the nada, the adama, the jaffa, etc. But what you find here are those fields and shields are interacting with each other, and they form all different sets of planes, and they form different spark pulse currents as they run through each other, where the energies from each of them, the type of radiation from each of them combined. So when we're looking at these, we're seeing just 2 of them together. It gets even more complex trying to see who's on first when you get the D1 grid put in there, and then the larger one. But this becomes important later when we look at these in terms of the things that become the vertical maps. Because at first they start out as circular maps, where you can see from the core up to what layer of the atmosphere is what, and then you can see where, if you understand where the D2 one is, that would correspond to the physical planetary body that we perceive as a physical Earth. All right. The next level that has to do with our atmosphere would correspond with the D3 mental body. So there are graphs that will show you this, but this is where the structure comes from. It comes from the structure itself of the Partiki bodies in the Rasha, what do they call this? The Rasha Amore body, all right, which is part of the Rasha body structure. So you end up with these coordinates down here. Can we pull this up a little bit, please? Thank you. All right, this is just a real quick rundown to give you an example. D2 Sha 11 equals D3 Ka 9 equals density Ta 7, right? Now, this shows you the different interfaces between them. The D1's almost got cut off over here, like D2 Ra 10. I'll go bring it over here is D1 12, La 12 on D1. So it shows you where the interfaces would be. Now, when you get to the bigger, you don't see this grid on there, and you don't see the density grid on there. But what gets interesting is when you remember the basic 5 elemental planes that each of them form, where you have from the 1, 2, and 3 layers, right? The nada and the nada, the adama, and the jaffa. They represent the frozen solid core, right? Then the next 4, 5, and 6 layers, the Dao, the Ida, and the Jada, they are the aquifers, where they are the liquid core areas. Then you have the 7, 8, and 9, which are the lower, middle, and upper layers of the mantle, or the solids. Then you have the 10, 11, and 12, which are considered the 3 layers of the atmosphere. And then you have the 13, 14, and 15. Now, each of these would have that scale, 13, 14, and 15, and they would represent the coronasphere, right? If you notice, each of them has a set of those. So you have different interfaces happening between if the square blocks here represent the 7, 8, and 9, which are the mantles, right? So the mantle here, bring it over. You have the lower mantle here crossing through the upper mantle on D2. So if this is the D2 upper mantle, the Earth we see is solid, right? That means the D3 lower mantle crosses through it. Now, if the D3 layers are the mental body planes, and the D2 are the telluric planes, or the emotional body planes that we see as the solid planes, this implies some interesting things. There are structures that correspond, when we get into the planetary level, to each of these layers, such as when we're in the 4, 5, and 6 layers, these little funny ripply lines, they're the aquifers, they're the flows, where you have lavas and waters and silica crystal, actually, liquid silica crystal running in these. And there are correspondences where we can find out what is actually running, both physical and etheric, below our feet, but also above us in the clouds. This is where we start to understand where, let's say, if it was characteristic of the level 8 Ma layer, which is the middle mantle layer, to have something called temples. Right? Now, some of them would be physical. The D2 level ones would be physical. The D1 level mantle ones would be etheric. And the D3 ones would be of a different type of matter. They would be what we consider the mental ones, or the atmospheric ones. All right, so if we have temples here at 8, it means we have temples here at 8 too. These would be the subterranean, but what appear above us, cloud cities. All right, but they're subterranean in relation to the D3 grid. So this is where we start to understand, right back here in the templates, before we're really talking about planets, we can begin to understand where the planetary body and thing fits in with the structure of just even seeing 2 embedded. We're seeing the D2 and the D3 embedded layers of the, whatever they call this body, the Rasha Amore body. Can we bring that down again, please, honey? And this is why I wanted to take you through the structure of these, so you could see where these form from the point of the first particle, going through the keys and all that, and then being able to apply it directly to the map. So when you start to use the journeys that go directly with these maps, you'll understand what these maps are about. You'll understand how they apply to the direct structure of creation. You'll know what a Rashalay body is, that kind of thing. All right, so anyway, on to the next one. This was Life-Born Cycle, Stage 4, and that were the close-up of the D2 and D3 templates. All right, next one, please. Yes. Next, we're going to get back to this again. Remember, this was the Akasha Aya of the Yukatharista body. Now we're building up toward formation of that, but they're not quite there yet. Would you put that one over for a minute for me, honey, and put the next one on, please? Because I'm going to need that one back again. That's words. Right. Now, we moved from the life-born cycle of 3 to what's called the God-born cycle of 4. Now, from the Partiki template, that was where we had the 6 cracks, 6 pops, and the little bang. From the Partiki body all the way up through the Rasha Amore body, we had what's called the middle bang. All right, the phases that created those expansions. Now we've got the next cycle, which is called the God-born cycle. And this is the Big Bang. This is the Big Bang that science talks about or hints about, that there is a theory of a Big Bang of some sort. And there's all this stuff about dark energy before the Big Bang. Because what the Big Bang did, as far as science is concerned, is basically give a cosmic soup. But where that soup came from, it's, who knows, right, as far as the Big Bang theory goes. Well, before the Big Bang were all those things. You had the things before. You had all the way back to the first Partakai, all the way up through the Rasha Amore body and the middle bang. Now the Big Bang occurs. And what happens with this is, excuse me, oh, and by the way, they call each of those 4 layers of the Rasha Amore body sheaths. S-H-E-T-H-E-S. Sheaths? S-H-A-T-H-E-S. Yes, like a sheath. There we go. S-H-E-A-T-H. There's an E on the end of it that they keep putting there, and I don't know why. It's not on this one because I don't know why, but they've been spelling it with an E, and it gets me very nuts as far as spelling goes. But they call it the 4 sheaths of the Rasha Amore body. All right, now, the next thing. Okay, the Rasha Amore body, with its 4 sheaths, and all the stuff that's inside that, with, and those sheaths they each have those 15 structures, right? All right, so they contract and expand, and they form what's called the 7 sons of the krystar Amore Riche body, the God-born body. 4 Akashi bodies expanding clockwise, and 3 Adashi bodies returning counterclockwise, and the outer Yukatharista body. All of that comes as the Rasha Amore, 4th sheathed body, goes and. All right, I don't know how, they haven't said whether it pops, bangs, cracks, or just goes plop. But what it creates is, I think there's one that comes before this, actually. Yeah, no, actually, I know what it did. Okay. So before, where you had the 4 layers, right? Where you had the 4 Cathargas, 1, 2, 3, 4 embedded ones, right? It does a replica of that in the same size and space, but it also sets in motion, because it sets these in motion to where they're spinning, it creates counterspin areas. So where you had 4, 1, 2, the ones that are in dark, 1, 2, 3, and 4, you now have ones in between them. This gives you 5, 6, and 7. And they're considered the 7 actually inner sons of the krystar Amore Riche body. And this is what we've been referring to as very loosely, as the Rashalay hub body. Inside of, now if this is the top of that, right? Actually, I think it goes over this way. Yeah. I have this backwards. This should go over there. All right. This would be 9 in the Ettore Yukatharista body. If you draw that line over, and this is the center line up, bring that down, it would give you this shape, but over there, and that would be the 12 point in the outer Yukatharista Akasha Aya body for the Ettore. This one would be the same for the Adore side. All right? So this is where you go from the Rasha hub bodies expanding out into birthing the outer creation of the ekamaps, of the God world gates, that start with the big one, which is the Akasha Aya level, inside of which you have all these little smaller ones that bring us down to our Veka and where we are down here inside of our Akasha. All right, so this is the process from first Partakai all the way up through forming the Partiki bodies and templates that are part of the Rasha bodies, and then the Rasha bodies being the structures that form the manifest matter structures. And the Big Bang occurs when it goes from the particle dark matter templates into the outer manifestation. It is those templates that cause the organization of things. Why cosmic soup, which comes out as a big blast of spark pulse currents, why it organizes itself into specifically structured atoms, molecules, and they accrete and form different things that eventually gel into stellar bodies and planets and solar systems and stars. It is no accident that that happens, and there is a design behind it. And that's what science here doesn't know about yet or doesn't remember, that there is, yes indeed, dark matter, the stuff you don't see yet, does exist. It isn't dark, and yes, it holds the templates that arrange galaxies, solar systems, and universes. And also, it arranges what happens and what's supposed to happen naturally within the cores of stars and planets, which allows them to breathe through to those invisible templates so they can be eternal life instead of finite life. Finite life systems will nova as far as stars or anything like that. That is the natural end to a finite system, is nova. And nova does not happen unless bardo happens first. And bardo is the closing and compaction of the prana seed at the core of the partiki body. So, if you have your prana seed open and it's able to phase, it means you can take the core life force currents that are produced all the way down into source and all the way back can fully flow. It means you're capable of not just going in the expansion cycles in an expanding universe, but you get to the point where full expansion is reached, and you are then capable of turning around and getting larger and going into the cycles that go back, which are called the Adashi cycles. What science here doesn't recognize is, yes, the universe continues to expand and expand. They keep wondering what it's going to do. Is it going to blow apart or explode or what? But it's expanding because they haven't seen it reach its end of expansion yet. Because when it reaches an end, there is a natural end to expansion, and that is not nova unless it is a system that died. Nova will be the end for systems that have died. For systems that aren't, starfire is the natural end. It's the turnaround point. Starfire is the turnaround point where certain layers of the Rasha bodies fully activate and take you into the Risha bodies. And that allows you to go back from outer domains into middle Edan domains, and then from middle Edans back into Adan domains, and then from Adan domains back into core domains. And it's a perpetual, eternal life cycle of expanding and contracting universes. And that's something that science has lost touch with here, is they don't realize there's a contraction too, but it's not a contraction that makes everything crash into each other. It's fully organized and structured upon the partiki dark matter templates, just like the expansion cycles are. Next one, please. Not yet. We could. Nah, that's right. Oh, yeah. This is the one they threw at me when we went for dinner break, where I was hoping just to put the sequence after this together. And they said, no, you've got to finish this one. I said, oh, no. Now, we're still at the, whatever they called that last one. All right. The last one was the body of God, the manifest body of God. If you turned the one you just saw up where the point of the larger one, which was the Ekatharista grid, was turned upright. So if this is the Ekatharista grid, right? What you were looking at is the Rasha bodies would start here. That would be the top of its grid. So this would be the Rasha body sets, where those 7 inner suns of the, what do they call that bit? What was the name of the last one? I'm just learning these two. The Rishi Amaraya. Yeah. Yeah, so this would be the Risha Amaraya level, that inside of it has the Rasha levels. But here, not being shown, would be those 7 inner sun layers. Now what you also have out here are what are considered the 7 outer suns. All right? These are the Atori Ekatharista Akasha Aya body base shield, 7 outer suns. So there would also be 7 layers. Now, this is, again, it appears to be another 6 pop, where you go pop, 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 but they're not full pops because the grids are not fully. So you have 1, 2, 3, but you actually have 1, 2. They're half steps. 3, 4, 5, 6. Right? It's through those 6 pops, and this forms what's called the pillar of power on the Akasha Aya body. The pillar of power is also known as the rod and the staff is the power generator of the outer domains. And it's the spark pulse currents, just like when a long time ago when we were learning how to phase our ethos pillar up. I didn't have time to put the names in here, but you end up with this would be the density grid, right? This would be the primal light grid that went with that density. This would be a density, that would be a primal light. So there would be your Veka structure. Then down here you would have, your next one down here would be your ethos. And the next one up here, your eros. And in between those two, okay, so you have ethos and ethos. And this one over here is also eros. Sorry, this one is eros. Eros and eros, ethos and ethos on this level. In between those two, you have the ka and the tha. You'd have the ka and the ka and the tha and the tha and the ka, I believe. These are stuff we learned in K2-3, where did they come from? And these little end ones, they have oses on the end too. We have like electros and magnos, and then thermos and hydros, I believe, are the other two of those. So I have to get the names in these. But this is where it goes from being the inner rasha bodies, which are, when you're talking about outer domain layers, you're talking about rasha. They are the anatomy of the rasha body, and they create the pillar of power that corresponds with the outer domains, the first part of the outer domains, which is the Akasha Aya body of the Yukatharista. So we'd have the Atori one going this way, and the Adore side going this way. And the phasing of these is the pulling in to the core and sparking all as they go along. They spark each of the layers of the 7 layers here, the 7 spheres here. And then there's 7 more spheres inside there that correspond with the 7 inner suns. So you got 7 and 7, 14. Then there's one more layer that is called the Rishe, Son of God body. If this is the body of God, this is the body of the Son of God. And that is the final layer where you see you have layer 12 of the outer domain, Akasha Yukatharista, has its 13, 14, and 15 layers. And this gets into something that you'll see that has to do with the starfire point. So this is how the ekamaps of the God World Gates were created from the first Partakai coming all the way through. And boy, have I been trying to get that sequence for about 2 years. It's been difficult. And at least we've got enough now to show what pieces are where and where they fit. The next, very soon, we'll see how they fit in a sequence. Next one, please. Summary. Right? Just so I remember what we just went through, and hopefully it'll help you too. Number 1 was the light-born cycle. The Taran light seed is born at the end of it. That was Partakai 1 and 2 to the triad at axis 0-1 to the birth of the Taran living light seed. Way back then, started that in Tenerife. Right? Number 2 is the star-born cycle. The Partiki seed atom and Rosetta are born. And that was the Taran axis 1 to Taran axis 1-9, which means it comes back to 1, and it's on its 9th rotation. That means this is where we have those sets of tachyon cycles. We have 6 tachyon cycles, and the 7th cycle is a Rushate cycle, and the 8th cycle that brings you back to 1 is a flame cycle. And that goes to the birth of the Rosetta and the seed atom. These represent the Partakai anatomy of first creation. Then from there, we go to 3, the life-born cycle. And this is the cycle of the birth of the Partiki, dark matter, templates, and bodies of the Rasha. All right, so they are the Rasha cycles that have to do with the birth of those templates that form later the outer domains. And what you have here was stage 1 was the Partiki template, 15 layers and 15 bands, and the first pillar of power of the 6 it had 6 cracks that gave you the center, 6 pops that gave you the first 6 of the pillar of power on the Partiki template level, and the little bang, which is the bing, the bong, and the boom. Okay? And that gives you the Krystala core. Then the stage 2 was the first pillar of power pulses, where it contracts and expands again, creates the Partiki body, which are 15 rings, gel spheres, that the layers became rings, and the 15 spans, or crystal orbs, where the bands became spans, or orbs. And here's where you get the ASCO, or the Alon, Shalon, Kalon, and Oron crystal sets. And here you get the core Etor, E-Ta-Or. Okay? So you've got the Ask, ASCO crystal power orbs. These are the power orbs that are the power generator orbs that are capable of making full spark generation that allows the center point to open, that allows for prana exchange to occur. And this is also where you get the core Ita ore. Now, the core Ita ore is important because of what happens next. Stage 3 is where you get the first ASCO conception pulse. Now, this is a whole set of graphs, actually, that shows you what happens when the Kalon drops to the Shalon and the Alon rises into the Shalon, and they fertilize the Shalon. And then all sorts of things happen that lead to conception. And it's very complicated, and it has to do with the fire lines and what takes place within them and how it all ends up down in the center and sparks the center and actually makes the Ita ore split, and that's where you get the prana seed. All right, so the partiki body and the density, the 5 elemental density planes form at this level after the first phase conception pulse of the ASCO crystals, and this is where the core prana seed is formed and the Iran point hole that leads back to the seed atom, because what was the core Ita ore is split by the sparks that are generated and go back to the center from the ASCO crystal sets. All right? Then the next point, and remember the Iran point is literally the doorway between the partiki dark matter templates, or the Rasha bodies, and that are partiki bodies, and the more prime stuff that is the partikai bodies that goes up to the creation of the first seed atom. All right? In stage 4 of, again, the life-born cycle, was the Rasha Amore, 4-sheathed body, which is the 3-dimensional Attore Adore template. All right, and that was formed there. Now, at a certain point, and I think it's here, when we get to number 5, or 4, the God-born cycle. This is where you've got the Big Bang and the birth of the crystal Risha Amore, the 7 suns hub, and the outer Eucharista body. All right? Now, this is where I believe we get the 7 suns, both suns. Yeah, 7 suns and 7 suns. The 7 suns and the 7 suns, the 7 inner and the 7 outer. I was just writing these really quick, and I think I got that other before I got this. Yes, this was done before dinner, and they gave me that last one about the outer 7 suns when you guys were at dinner. So that didn't get put there yet. But there's another set of 7 suns, are the outer ones. These are the inner ones of the Risha Amore. No, there should be the outer ones. There should be 7 here for the Rasha Amore and 7 outer ones for the Risha Amore. That's how that goes. So anyway, that's the Big Bang, and that is the birth of the Eucharista body. That is when the first form of the Eucharista outer body takes place. There is another one, heaven help us. It's the 5th. It's called the Christ-born cycle. This is the silent bang, the eternal bang, still point, the bang that isn't a bang. At creation. Let's see, at creation and completion of the 4 domains expansion Akashi cycle. So after you get that whole thing there, happening 4 times, actually 3 times. You have the core set, and the core set leads up to the formation of the first seed atom, which is the unici, and then all this other stuff happens. And right here, I believe, when this occurs, the first 2 partikai of the next domain out are formed. Yeah. And of course, they phase and form a Taran light seed for the next domain out, and that goes through its starborn cycle, and that forms its seed atom for the next domain out. This is where we get the seed atom layers, where you have the unicized seed atom that is the seed atom to the inner. You have the Umshari, which is the seed atom to the middle, and then you have the Yanesa, which is the seed atom to the outer domains. So this whole thing basically happens once for the inner, once for the middle, and once for the outer domains. Once that is done, then there's something called the Christ-born cycle. After each of the domains goes through this creation thing, and through its whole Akashi cycle, and this is referred to as the Akashi cycle. You have one cycle of these expansions going for the from the core through the inner. Then you have the middle ones. Then you have the outer ones. It's actually 4 cycles. It's considered the seed cycle, which brings you up to the seed atom, and then you have the inner, the middle, and the outer domain. So there's actually 4 cycles to that, 4 Akashi cycles. Once they are done, there is something, that is where full expansion is reached at the end of that 4th cycle, which happens to be called the Kali Yuga. Yeah, we'll get into that in a minute. Right? Yeah. Then something called the krystar, Risha A, son of God, body of the Christ, is born, and the Adashi return cycles of the Risha bodies begin. So this is where we see the context in which these bodies exist. Next one, please. Okay, can we start over here? Yeah, let's start over here. Okay, let me see if I can do this. All right, here we go. Down here it says starseed cycle, cycle 1. That's the Rasha A body of the core domain. All right, this is where we get up to the birth of the unici. This is a set of tachyon cycles, a tachyon 6 cycle. All right, 4, 6 cycles. Tachyon 6 cycle plus if you look at this as the 0 axis, and this is the theta. All right, which is the theta cycle of the triad. Then you have the Tarn, birth of the Tarn. Then you have tachyon cycle 1, tachyon cycle 2, tachyon 3, tachyon 4, tachyon 5, tachyon 6, which brings you to axis 7. Then you have 7 being the Rushate cycle, where there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens that has to do with going in the other direction and picking up the keys that belong to the other side, as well as the ones that belong to this side that you acquired by going this way. And then there's what's called the flame cycle. And it's at the end of the flame cycle that you have the final contraction into source, and then pop-out replication gives you the birth of the unici inner seed atom. So that gives you the seed atom for the inner domains. Right? There's another 6 cycle here, which is actually 6 tachyon cycles, a Rushate cycle, and a flame cycle together. All right, that is considered a full tachyon round. A full tachyon round is called an Iyuga. All right, Eyugha, I believe it is. All right. Now, we talked about in Voyagers, we talked about first the Yuego cycles, which are smaller cycles within the larger Yuega cycles. So there are 4 Yuga cycles. Each one of those Yuga cycles corresponds to part of the first creation cycle. The starseed cycle corresponds to Yuga 1. Somewhere, I don't know if it's on this one or the next one, I have the names of the Yugas. Oh, yeah, this is the Raleigh Yuga. That is the first one, and that corresponds with the core domain. It gives birth to the unici seed atom. From there, the seed atom cycles, and this is where you get all of those 6 cracks, 6 pops, bing bang, bing bong, boom, etc., right? So this body has its full set all the way to its outer domains. Right? And at that final point, when that births its God body layer, it also gives birth to the first 2 particle units that will form the seed atom of the next layer. All right, this domain here is called the inner domain. This is where we have units that are called adons. This is called the starborn cycle. You have starseed cycle, starborn cycle. This is the cycle of the Rasha La, the inner domain Rasha body. So you have the core domain Rasha body is the Rasha A. The inner domain one is the Rasha La. All right, now, after that cycle does its full thing going to its outer domains and its echomaps. You know, they all have their ecomap levels. All right, then it has birth of the middle seed atom, which is the or actually the first 2 particle that create the birth of the middle Umshadi seed atom for the middle domains, which are called the Eden domains because they're formed of Eden cells, light cells. This is the 3rd Yuga. All right, the 2nd Yuga, I don't know if I said the name. Oh, the 2nd Yuga is called the Ale Yuga. The 3rd Yuga is called the Shale Yuga. All right? Elon shields, Shalon shields, Kalon shields, Kala Yuga, 4th outer domain. Okay? This is where all these came from. This is what the Sanskrit teachings once upon a time tried to teach people about. All right? So you have the 4 Yuga cycles. You have the middle domains with the Edons, and that's where our going back to the garden is. Now, this gives birth to, after its full ecomap cycle, gives birth to the first 2 particle that become our Yanesa outer domain seed atom, and from there that goes through its 6 pops, 6 cracks, 6 pops, 3, etc., till we have the outer ecomaps that we've been looking at. Okay, and that would be the outer domain radon cycle. It's called the star burst, or the 4th cycle, and this is the Rasha Lay body. All right, so we have this. It starts this way. It goes star seed, starborn, star flame, star burst, right? Rasha A, Rasha La, Rasha Li, Rashale. All right? Core, inner, middle, outer. What happens when you get to the end of this one? This is where you go into the 5th cycle that is known as the starfire cycle, the starfire point. All right? This is where the Akashi cycles of expansion are done, and where the Rashale body of the outer domains turns into the Rishale body and enters what is called the starfire body. This is called the sunshine cycle of the Risha A. So you start out with a Rasha A way down at the core, and you end up with a Risha A. And it is this point that the Rasha Le body gets to ride in. It activates the larger portions of fields around it, and it gets to, it is also known as the aqualene sun. Thank you. All right, that helped. All right. Me anyway. So the Rashale body, once it's fully activated, can then fully activate the aqualene sun, or the Risha A body, the body of the Son of God, or the body of the krystar, and move into the next cycle, which would be cycle 5. So it passes through starfire, it goes into the starfire cycle, which is the first Adashi cycle. The Akashi cycles, there are 4 of them coming outward, are called the Yugas, E-Y-U-G-H-A, and the ones going back to source are called the Adashi cycles, or the Iedas. So there are 3 Ieda cycles going back to source. Actually, I think there's 2 Ieda, and there's Ieda something or other. There's another name tacked at the end of that, so they technically consider it 2 Iedas and 1 whatever the Ieda something or other at the end, which is the end cycle. Now, something interesting happens. This is why this is an eternal cycle. Can we bring this back this way, honey, please? Once you go into this state, which allows you to go back from the outer domains back into the Edans, right? You're back into the middle. And you have this body, which is called the Rishale body, right? So the Rashale goes into Risha A state, and then becomes the Rishale body. This is where the Christ body, or the Christ body, expands as the manifest body contracts back into getting smaller and smaller as the krystar body expands and expands. And they get back to the middle, the first creation point. They go back to seed, and when it goes back into, the whole thing goes back into creation point. And when it pops back out, it does 2 things at once. One, the eternal Son of God body, or the starfire body, is the one you pick up here, the Risha. Now, this was the first creation cycle, created it. But once it's there, once it goes back in once, it continually, whenever the cycle completes, everything goes back into source, then it comes back out all the way again, and at the same time, a new seed is set. So a new set of yugas begins. And they always meet here again, and then this will ride back with them. And it always comes back out when it's reborn out, and they always pick up together again. So it's a continual cycle of Rashale body activation. The Rasha bodies, then the Risha bodies, and then back to source. Then the Rasha bodies and the Risha bodies, and back to source. It's supposed to be a perpetual motion, eternal life system. And it actually is. There's only certain parts of it that aren't functioning that way. So, in simple terms, we finally found places for a lot of words that I've been struggling to find places for. We got the starseed cycle, starborn cycle, star flame cycle, starburst cycle. At the end of the starburst cycle, you have starfire and enter the starfire cycle 5. Then you have the starlight cycle 6, the starshine cycle 7, and then you go back to starseed cycle again, and it recycles. So this is where we are. We are at the Kali Yuga, the end of the Kali Yuga, because of the activations that have been taking place on this planet, pushed by the beast machine activations in the threshold. So we have a choice of either becoming a system that gets stuck out here, where its core gates or its prana seed closes and compacts, and then we will simply, in the next phase, get dragged back in as space dust, or we get to activate the Rasha bodies and go into this state in order to make the passage into the Adashi cycles. Going to the Adashi temples is the beginning of learning how to do this, so we can begin to ride the real ascension spirals home. Because we've been hearing an awful lot about ascension for an awful long time here, not just this lifetime. And a lot of it's been garbage. Now, they were teaching garbage in Egypt 10,000 years ago. So, not all of it, but some of it. these teachings have lived alongside of all the other teachings that were from the Metatronics or the Time people, because both of them had a different set of how to distort the natural laws to make sure you could become part of their agenda, right? These are the original teachings. It was promised they would be brought back in the end times, and they are being brought back. So, anyway, this is to show you where your Rashalay body fits, right? There, okay? And also your Rishalay. And there's something neat about this too. There are states of being, states of matter, states of consciousness. This is where we get these words, okay? The Seta state refers to the outer domain state. The Sadi state, S-A-D-H-I, refers to the middle. The Yuma state refers to the inner, and the Yuna Siddha refers to the core state. Now, when you get up here into the Rasha, or the Risha states, right, the Adashi cycles, you have the Sadi Seta state, the outer and the middle combined, right? Here you've got the Sadi Yuma state, the middle and the middle and the inner combined. Here you have the Yuma Yuna state, where it's the Yuma inner and the core state combined. So when you hear about Sadi Setas and these kind of different types of techniques, these are the states of consciousness and states of matter and states of Rishalay that we are beginning to activate in our bodies. When we take the journey, the access key journey to the Adashi temples, it is considered a Sadi Seta journey, all right, which means it's working with first the Seta being the outer, getting it into the middle. So Sadi Seta would be, it's a state that's activating these portions of your Rasha body structures, right? I think that's all on that one. Next one, please. How am I doing on time? Well, that's not too bad. If I can whip through that pack of 20, yeah. This is just to show it to you a little bit, easier again where you start. Can we see the end, honey, please? Can we see the end, please? So it's just, again, the starseed cycle, starborn cycle, star flame cycle, star burst cycle, which is the Rasha A body, the Rasha La body, the Rasha Li body, the Rasha Le body, and then we go up into starfire and the Rishalay, and over here we have the krystar body and the Risha A. Yes, we go to the Risha A state, and it allows us to take the krystar body back in, where we begin the Rishalay, and then the Rishali, and then the Rishala, and then back home again. And when we go back home, some of us will pop back out again in a whole other creation cycle, and our krystar will come out here and hold the template of everything from the cycle before. This is why nothing is ever forgotten. The imprint of it, whatever can make it through a starfire, will always be held eternally in the living body of Source. That's why nothing can become extinct in that, because of that. Where anything that can ride or have its imprint carried with something that can ride into krystar state, it will always be part of the living memory matrix of Source. And that means it can be regenerated again at another time. So there are things that can be done here where certain places that go back as space dust, because they hit space dust return, at the same time that there is a natural cycle of starfire taking place. If they can be remembered fondly for their highest level, the fact that someone remembered whoever they were, but as their Christic self before they fell, that memory imprint will go back with the ones who can ride back, and it will be set back in the cosmic Christos. So they will always have a memory imprint of whoever they were at their best. So they will have the opportunity, once they do go back as space dust, to pick up that template on the way back home and reassemble themselves. So they can, by the time they get home, still be whole again. So that's one of the little mercies that a lot of the space dust ones don't even realize exist. That yes, they will temporarily lose their template, but as long as they can be fondly remembered as their highest imprint, as long as somebody can carry, or at least a collective can carry, collectively, the encryption of what their core encryption was in memory back with them, that will be reset in the krystar body. So on their way through, when they come back through as space dust, they will be able to reassemble each of their little space dust pieces that will still bear the encryption that they once wore. So they will be able to ride their Risha bodies home. And this is one of the things where all of the fighting that gets done over fall, over not listening to God's will, over bending the rules to the point where you break them, of natural energy mechanics. They're so silly. And of being afraid of going back as space dust is not the most pleasant thing to do, but there is, as long as someone remembers you, as long as someone still cares and still can love you, you can still have the chance to get yourself back together. So when you go home to meet God, you can go home whole. And a lot of them hate that fact because they're ashamed of what they've allowed themselves to become. And they'd actually rather not go home with anyone remembering them at all. So they don't have to have any of their wholeness back. But they don't realize if they had their wholeness back, they wouldn't feel that way once they got through the starfire transition. So it's kind of like a catch-22 for the falling races. There is mercy. There always has been. It's an eternal life program. But when you're stuck down here in the drama someplace, it can seem very, very scary, and you can make some really dumb decisions repeatedly to the point where you do go back as space dust. But what we are going to do, what the Aquafarian races are doing, and they're asking those of us who are here, those who can remember, this is part of the reason why we've been taught about the ones who fell. We've been taught about what their names were. We've been taught about where they came from. We've been taught about what their problem was, of why they did what they did, so we can remember them. And there's going to be a point in time when we're asked to hold a memory of love for them, of recognizing no matter how bad and awful and terrible they got. And that's going to be fun when we start to see some weird stuff happen outside on this planet. To really remember that they might not love us and they've become so despicable to themselves that they can't stand themselves, so they act really horribly and have no remorse. But once upon a time, they came from the same place. And if you can hold an idea, of no matter how hated the action might be coming from something or someone, once upon a time, they were just as Christic as you. And if you can remember that little tiny bit of amore for them, you will bring a piece of the memory of what they are back with you. And that will give them an opportunity to be cleansed themselves, to find themselves clean again, where nobody's losing anything by the time everybody gets back home. So there will be a time when we're asked, maybe it'll be tomorrow, I don't know, because I didn't even know we were going there. We'll be asked to remember and to hold that memory with love and to let go of the hatred or the hatred of the action, whatever, to let it go and just carry the memory with absolute love with it. And that also is healing for us, because we can get really, really tied up and really sick of all the negative stuff. Boy, have I been sick of teaching it. I don't want to know anymore about any fall races. I have my little hissy fits sometimes. I really do. They're very patient with me because I don't have them at them. I just have them in general. I was kind of, can I have a room in the Adachi temple to scream in, please? Just a room where I can go scream, because I don't want to teach them about the fact that the solar gate's just compacted. So I get in those spaces, and they help me find nice spaces where I can go vent and not hurt anything, and then stabilize my energy fields. Hey, I have an emotional body here. I do care. One of the last things I want to do is come out and tell anybody any more bad news, because for the last 6 years it's been getting worse and worse, and this is not really what I wanted to do here. I wanted to teach happy ascension teaching so everybody could be happy on their way back home. I wasn't planning to have to reveal the beast and the time rip people and the names of everybody and have just about everybody in the New Age movement hate my guts and make up stories about me because I've kind of blown their teachings out of the water. I didn't do it. The Beloveds did it, but I'm the mouthpiece. Right? So I have my issues sometimes with, can I quit now? And they did say once that once you start it, you can't turn back. If you want to publish that first book that we gave you, just no, you don't have to. You can say no now. But once you do, there is no turning back. Boy, were they not kidding. And I had no idea. But you know what, after all? There is a turning back. But it's a little further out than I might have imagined. But I'm very, very happy, and I hope I've been able to teach these. These are the most precious teachings in the universe, and I am so honored to have them that no matter how frustrated I get with some of the other stuff that has to be revealed along the way, I adore these teachings because I know they're the truth. And I hope I can do them justice and teach them enough where you can feel some of that, where you can feel and look at this and say, hey, that is the way it was. Some part of me remembers that. I don't know if I can teach it that well. I can teach it only to the degree that I know how, with a lot of help. Thank you. That's fun. Don't mean I do all right? There's more information that goes with those cycles. I just wanted you to see where this starts and what it looks like when it first comes. Well, actually, that's about the third recap until you get these straight. There's a lot more information for each of these cycles to be put in, but that was the start of the other ones you just saw that were coherent. Right? All right, next one, please. Which one was that? Yeah, I would think so, actually. Yeah, we'll get a copy of that. At least I need to put the whatever stuff we put on them, or copyright stuff on them. Because it's scribbled right now, and I just have to make sure I don't have anything listed wrong. That's why I haven't released any of this stuff. It's barely legible to put it up on the Mylars. To put this out for publication for anyone, I mean, I may have a word wrong, and I will. If I see them on the Mylars and I learn something later by the next workshop, I will correct myself there. But if it goes out and it's published in that form, I don't want to put out material that's wrong. We don't have time to check it. But that one is pretty easy enough, and we've fought with that for 2 years to get that sequence down. Yeah, we finally have it, so we'll try if we can. There's a lot of people. Do you think we could get a copy of that for everybody before they leave? Well, it depends on what. I'm sorry. Okay, talk to me about it later. Yeah, but we'll work on that. Okay, the summary. Okay. Yeah. All righty. Now, back to this again. Just to remind you, before we go into, what is the next one? I think I know what the next one is. I think I need a sip of Coke before I launch onto this one. Yes. Okay. I'm going to have a sip of Coke before this. Now we're going to start. We just moved through Rochelet body studies. Now we're going to go into planetary Rochelet. And I need a drink before that, before I start talking about this one, because boy, is this a mouthful. If we can simply remember, whatever this was the Partiki body. I see so many of them, and they fly by so fast. It's like, what was that again? This was the Partiki body, the 5 elemental planes and the prana seed. All right, that was of the number 3 life-born cycle, stage 3. All right, I just wanted to remind you of this in terms of the Rochelet body structure, because now we're going to look at these structures in terms of a stellar body, such as a sun or Earth. That used to be a stellar body. It used to have a coronosphere that glowed. That's when it could still breathe, because it requires the generation of frequency in the fire chambers. It has to do with the prana seed, and it has to do with the alons, kalons, and shalons, that allows for the coronosphere to continue to fire itself. We still have a coronosphere on Sol, on that sun, so it has been doing some degree of prana exchange within its outer fields. Now, what is going to happen with this at this point? Because the 3 core gates, which are the 3 units of the prana seed on a planetary or a stellar level, have compacted. There will be a certain amount of energy left within the system where it can still expand and contract in the inner body, and it will still be able to keep its fire burning on the outside, its coronosphere. But there's going to be other things happening. We'll talk more about what's going to happen in the sun, what they've said are going to happen in the sun in a little bit. But what I want to first show you is where these structures of Rochelet body plug into stellar or planetary bodies, so we can start to understand what become the vertical maps. Next one, please. Now I'm cold again. First I'm hot, then I'm cold. Ooh. I get my jacket on. I don't know why I'm getting cold again. Excuse me. Okay, could you hold this, honey? Thank you. This is where it gets fun. Well, soon anyway. And at the end it gets fun, because that's when you find out what the vertical maps are. I was so thrilled when I saw them. I was like, oh, cool. All right, now, if we remember the diagram we just saw of the Partiki body, and remember this, Earth's, look at this, Earth's D2, some of the, Rochelet, because we're dealing with the outer domain, so they are the Rochelet, they're the Roche bodies, but they're the Rochelet out here. All right, so Earth's D2 Rochelet Partiki body. Now, this is interesting. If we're looking at this in terms of just the D2 grid, now we're not showing the embedding yet, right? We're just showing just one set of the 15 fields and shields, okay? Or shields would be spans and fields would be rings, okay, in the Partiki body. So we're looking at that same structure, but in terms of a planet, and just the D2 level. The D2 level we're looking at first, because that is the level that we actually see as solid, that our buildings are standing on the crust of it and that kind of thing, which means our buildings are standing on the crust, and the crust is the Ra-Ka layer that's between the Ka-9 and the Ra-10 layer. And that's where the crust forms, the rock, right? That's the surface. I mean, some of the word tones are hilarious where you see the connections to them, like rock. Yes, it's rock. Yes, raka, the raka. That's the layers also. I don't have these shown on here yet, but I'll probably get into them tomorrow, where there are these, I believe that's the Kalan layer, where you would have the Kalan crystals running through there, and then you'd have the Shalon crystals running through the Kama layer, and then you'd have the Elan crystals with the jewels running through the Mata layer. And these layers here, the Ta, the Ma, and the Ka, those three represent the lower, middle, and upper mantle, or the solids that are down below our feet and down below the crust. All right. If we're going downward in, and this is the D2 solid level, like the level we perceive as physical. The next we would have we had 9, 8, and 7. Then 6, 5, and 4 layer. These would be the aquifers. All right. So these would be the flows. They would have to do with lava, liquid silica, and waters. So subterranean, below the mantle layers, below the lower mantle, there would be waters. Now, some of these waters, there are characteristics when we get into the planetary levels of these. Some places have doorways, other places have, well, there are biomes, let's say, in each of these plane sets, because these, what were the 5 elemental density planes, they actually form planes of matter when we are out here. When we get them interfacing with each other, they have some very distinct planes of matter where we find out where our elemental kingdoms live, our little fairy people and all that kind of stuff, where the etheric ones that look like ghosts are coming from, that aren't ghosts, that are actually normal things that are supposed to be there, not things that are trapped. We'll find out some fascinating things. It starts with the D2 layer of the Partiki body of the planet. We go down past the aquifers, which are the 6, 5, and 4 layers. We get into, they are the liquid core area. Then you would have the solid core. This is 3, 2, and 1 areas, which are the frozen ethers. So we would have, and there's something that happens in the exchange between the Elons that are in the Mata. An Elon is a jewel in the Mata ores. The jewels have something to do. I think alchemy comes in here, where when it loses its jewel, the Mata ore turns to Meta L or metal Meta ore and sends fragments of itself down to the core to make Meta Ls. So I do believe it's a metal core, solid core, that is actually frozen ethers embedded with metals. All right. These are things the science is theorizing about as far as what is down there in the grounds. What gets really exciting is when we go upward, is here we find, all right, this is our surface crust. This is where we'd have our objects in our local, that we can walk around and see. This field here, which would be the Ra-10 field of the D2 Partiki template, this would be the inner atmosphere up to the thermosphere. So in here, this is where airplanes fly, this is where weather is created, all of those things take place within this band. What gets really interesting is we have those weird little things called Van Allen radiation belts out there, up there somewhere around our planet. They're not naturally supposed to be there. They're not part of the normal structure. We'll get into those in a little bit, because the natural structure of the D2 levels you would have your solid core with its metals and its frozen ethers, and you would have your aquifers, which are the 4, 5, and 6 layer, the Tao, the Ida, and the Jada. Came out of the deep, yes, and out of the deep and out of the water, and through the mantle and out to the surface is basically how we were created, actually, because there are planes that run down here where we have our fairy planes and our atomic etheric layers. If you take this and imagine that there's also a D1 grid inside this D2 grid, this is where you get another set of these. And these correspond to the D1 etheric atomic, and that's where you get little people and all sorts of things that are actually running around down inside various layers of the mantle at a little bit different angular rotation rotation of particle spin, and BPR, or base pulse rhythm, because you have your lower elemental kingdoms there. And yes, there are fairies, and yes, there are sphinx, and there's all sorts of funny named things and many things that don't have names here that exist in these biome domains. The biome domains are created from the density planes become matter planes, and different states of matter and different types of beings reside in them, just like we are one type of being that exists in the surface biome. All right? So there are other layers, including coronaspheres that should be out on this layer. In the coronaspheres, when you look at a sun, science said nothing could ever live there. They're assuming everything has carbon-based biology. In fact, most things don't have carbon-based biology. Most things have silica-based biology. And they are fully capable of, under normal circumstances, living in fields that look like they're on fire, but they don't feel fire, and they don't look like they're on fire when they're walking in them or through them. So there are fields out there. They see stars, oh, and life could never be there. Maybe not carbon-based life, but natural crystalline life is not carbon-based. Carbon-based is the mutation. And not all planets have it, but these do.